Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Environmental Protection Committee meeting. I'm Alice Blank, and we're going to start with a review by Laura Dodge, President of Excel Environmental, on the 250 Water Street Brownfield Cleanup Program. So welcome, Laura, and thank you.
Thank you.
Take it away.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so, oops, excuse me. That's my, hold on one second. Sorry, the downside from taking this from home. So the update. So the last EPC meeting, I gave an update on the test pit results, which was the first portion of the remedial design investigation. Since that time, the next phase of the remedial design investigation was completed. Actually, on February 25th, they completed the soil boring program, which is like 50 soil borings across the entire site to characterize soil that will be excavated and ultimately disposed of off-site so that they can figure out what the waste disposal requirements are for that soil in advance of excavation. And that minimizes the handling of soil on site, the need to stockpile soil on site. I mean, there still will be some stockpiling, but it minimizes it, knowing where it's going to be disposed of in advance. So that work was done on February 25th. And they also did some additional delineation around the petroleum impacted areas and some of the PCB soil samples that they had to delineate. So that work was completed without incident in terms of there being any exceedances of the action levels for mercury, volatile organics, or dust particulates. Really, there was not much to report in the way of air quality, similar to what we've seen in the past, just traces of mercury, but nothing approaching the action level of 1 microgram per cubic meter, nothing sustained. The revised community air monitoring program was put in place, same as with the test pit work. The revisions of those to the camp, I can go into if anyone has any questions, but we've documented, I think, in previous email updates what those revisions were. The revised camp will also be picked up in the full-scale remedial action work plan implementation. So the camp will be revised as it was for the test pits. Those same revisions will be carried forward. So the data from the waste characterization were soil analyses, and those have been coming in. Langen, I think, has most of those results. They're going to be preparing 2 reports. One is a remedial design investigation report on the test pit investigation, which will address the camp for the remedial action full scale, which again will include all the revisions to the camp that were made for the remedial design investigation. And there will also be the addition of a second Jerome J505 meter, in addition to the one that's been used to supplement the stationary camps. That was a request from DEC that will be carried forward into the full remedial action. So there'll be 2 J505s for the handheld, more sensitive instruments to be used during the full-scale excavation. The second report, that report's due out, I think, at the end of this month. The second remedial design investigation report will be on the soil sampling that was conducted for the waste characterization borings and the delineation borings. That's expected the first week in April. There is an updated remedial action schedule to sort of put together the pieces of when things will be done. My understanding from Langen, the consultant for HHC, is that draft has been sent to the agencies. They expect to get comments, and hopefully we'll see a copy of the updated schedule sometime this week or next week. What we do know is that the next, Howard Hughes is committed to not starting the excavation of mercury impacted soil until after schools are closed for the 2022 school year. So late June would be the earliest that they would initiate soil excavation for the full-scale remedial action, which would be focused on the hotspots for mercury impacted soil first. And then following that would be the rest of what they have to excavate, the underground storage tanks, petroleum impacted soil, and then historic fill. So that work will not start until after school is over, which I think is significant because we had asked for that. It was something that was discussed months ago, and I always felt that it was doable. And I think based on timing, it seems like, it will be. In the interim, there is some field work that's already been scheduled that relates to the building construction. And so Howard Hughes is applying for the 421A tax abatement for the affordable housing component of the development. And as such, they need to complete an initial phase of foundation work, the structural foundation for the building, by June 15th of 2022. So they will initiate one pile cluster in the southwest corner of the site, corner of Water Street and Beekman, which will include 4 drilled piers or piles and a pile cap for those piles. And that will be an excavation that will be after operations in the parking lot cease, which is anticipated to be April 15th of this year, 2022. There will no longer be the parking lot operations. Those will be permanently ceased. There'll be a construction fence installed around the area where the first foundation work will be started. It's not clear whether or not the construction fence will be around the entire property or it'll just be in the corner the southwestern corner, or basically the entire southern corner, for lack of a better way of putting it, I guess, Beekman, Pearl to Water Street, to quadrant that off. I think they're still working out that detail. The construction fence will be in accordance with DOB requirements. It'll be 8 feet high. It'll be a solid fence. There can't be no one will be able to see through it. That initial foundation work involves excavation down to various depths that are going to be detailed in more detail than we have right now, but generally speaking, it'll be an excavation of about 8 feet deep. The 13-inch diameter piles will then be installed. There'll be 4 in the cluster. Those go down. I just got this information today and how far they go. Each individual pile goes fairly deep. I think 65 to 85 feet, if I remember correctly. And then the pile cap is constructed, which is a formed concrete cap that goes over each of the 4 piles. It kind of joins the piles together. So after the initial 8-foot excavation, there'll be another, the excavation will be extended another 10 feet to a total depth of about 18 feet. Soils excavated during that time will be placed on plastic inside the fenced off area for offsite disposal. There will be management of groundwater during that time because they have to dewater in order to maintain the excavation. There'll be some tanks, or 1 to 2 tanks that will be brought in on site. There'll be closed top tanks to store the water so that it can be discharged to the sewer in accordance with the sewer discharge permit. So generally speaking, during that time, the camp that's been modified for the remedial design investigation will be implemented. So that will include all the changes that were made during for the remedial design investigation itself. As far as the timing for the modified remedial action work plan, that's being worked on now. So the remedial design investigation basically informs the changes to the remedial action work plan, which will essentially include the changes to the camp for the full-scale excavation under the remedial action work plan, and then the schedule itself, which is included as part of the remedial action work plan. That will be revised to reflect these different activities in a different timeline that we just described. It's anticipated that once the work for the initial structural foundation, the first pile cluster, gets completed, which is 45 to 60 days from the time that work starts, there will be likely some short pause in the work before the mercury impacted soil excavation would start. That will be the next field activity after that first pile cluster is completed. the mercury impacted soil won't start until after school's over, which is the end of June. So there may be some slight pause in field activity between those two activities, between the first pile cluster going in and the start of the mercury impacted soil. So once the mercury impacted soil is completed, they'll just continue to excavate the soil necessary for removal of the underground storage tanks, petroleum impacted soils, historic fill, as per the remedial action work plan. Again, we don't have the schedule for that yet because that's, still in DEC's hands right now in draft form. That will be provided to us hopefully by, sometime next week. So not really clear exactly when the remedial action work plan will be revised and resubmitted, but it'll be after the remedial design investigation reports are, obviously, because those data will need to be reported on first before the remedial action work plan would be updated. So the schedule for completion of the rest of that work would, be outlined in the remedial action work plan. I would expect that it's going to be fairly general. It's not going to break out in extraordinarily detail, but we can always ask for more details if we need them once we see the schedule. And what I mean by that is they may have just a duration for soil excavation. They're going to have the mercury impacted soil specifically identified. And then after that, it may just be a duration for the balance of the soil excavation that's included in the remedial action. So they're not 100% sure when that first structural foundation work will start. It could be as early as April 18th, but may wind up being early in May, depending upon when they get their Department of Building permits. So essentially right now, that's where we stand. We're going to be seeing an updated remedial action work plan schedule, followed by the remedial design investigation report on the test pit investigation, which will have the camp changes for the full-scale remediation, which we know will be what was implemented during the remedial design investigation based on my conversations with Langen and DEC. And then we'll get the report, the remedial design investigation report on the soil investigation. And those are the two documents that we're anticipating next. And then after that, there'll be the revised remedial action work plan. But again, that will only be the camp and the schedule, essentially, that will be revised. We would have already seen the two of those things prior to seeing the remedial action work plan itself. So in a nutshell, drums on site that were stored from the performance of the test pit work and the soil boring program that finished in February, those should be taken off site within the next 2 weeks. Hopefully there might be 1 or 2 remaining because of sampling requirements. Just got that update today, but the majority of the drums will be removed within the next 2 weeks, week to 2 weeks. So that's basically it.
Wow, that's a lot of information. Thanks a lot, Laura. I guess the first thing that just pops in my mind is just a reminder that we very quickly get that CAC meeting going with Langen and HHC to know all of their perspective on this, because if I'm understanding correctly, foundation work is to begin in about 2 weeks, yet they have no DOB permit. I may be speaking a few beats here.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are, I think that what they're relaying to us is that the earliest possible start would be April 18th. That's, obviously optimistic. It could be later than that, depending upon, because they obviously do need their permits and they recognize that. So in the updates, it could be, late April, early May, pending the DOB permit approvals.
But there's no thought that that might happen after June, and then they would lose their, advantage with the 421A. I mean, that's sort of a given that would be exercised.
That is a question when I asked, they really are not able to, my interaction has been with, the Langen project team, and then the DEC DOH, who are not involved in the 421A timing. But in asking Langen what would happen, that's not anything that they could answer. It's really a question that would be an HHC decision as to what they would do if they miss the timeframes. I mean, I would imagine that their perspective is that they can't miss the timeframes, so they have to do what they can. But I don't, I'm not involved in anything further beyond that.
Right, that's where I just felt like we all, this committee and all people that are involved in this really need this meeting as soon as possible so that we can catch up. But
Right.
for your part, thanks very much. All right, let's open it up to the committee members and committee board members. Anybody have a question? And attendees? Can't. Oh, maybe not. Okay. Wow. All right.
Hey, Alice, this is Wendy. I can't, I'm having trouble figuring out where my hand up button is. So I'm on the list, but I can't figure out. I'm
Well,
on a
go
new
ahead,
device.
Wendy. Thanks.
I'm sorry. I have a new device and I'm not so good with new devices.
Not
But
to
anyway,
worry.
thank you so much for that presentation. That was so helpful. Did I hear correctly, that the foundation piles are going to go in 80 feet? Is that what you said?
Let me just look at the update that I have here, so I'm being accurate in the information. Hold on 1 second.
And I know that's not really what you're doing. That's just one of the things.
No,
we
I'm
heard.
not involved in the geotechnical
Ex-
side of this,
Yeah, I
but
totally understand. But I think you
oh, you know
mentioned
what? I
that.
apologize. It's in a different location. 1 second.
You
But
had
to
said
Alice-
65 to
Yes.
85 feet. That's what you
Yeah,
said.
1 second. Yeah, the piles will be installed to a depth of about 65 feet below the proposed cellar grade, which is a total of about 80 to 85 feet below the existing ground surface.
And is that like a pile driver? I mean, you guys who do construction, that's what that is, right? It's a pile
Yeah,
driver.
they'll have a pile rig that'll be used to install those, and it's a combination of drilling and driving. So I think these are, grouted piles, so there'll basically be, a combination of techniques used to advance them.
And that
So-
will happen when school's still in session, if it starts as early as April 18th.
Correct.
And
That work
is,
would be going on.
yeah, and that is when we go back to the days of 234. And at this point, I wish we also had a lot of people from the Youth and Ed Committee here from the past. But those of us who remember those days, that, it shakes the ground, and, the kids who are, in those classrooms will very much feel that impact. So even though this is, we're talking about the environmental committee, it is going to affect the environment in terms of noise and ground shaking and these type of things. I mean, I understand they're going to be sensitive to the removal of toxic materials, but I think we should be, very worried about that piece too. Now, that's not your job, so I know that's not your, but to Alice's point, we need an updated meeting to know what's happening, because that's not a minor thing. So again, Laura, your stuff is awesome. But I'm just kind of raising this to the committee as a whole. So Alice is on the money.
Yeah, we've reached out, Wendy and all, to the various players. Diana's very much on it, and we're hopeful to hear from them very soon. And there's no question that it's very, very urgent we have the meeting. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Your update was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Again, just to be clear, these are not driven piles, so they're not like timber or steel driven piles. They're drilled, but there will be obviously a rig used to do that and to advance them. And so at that depth, that is, it takes 45 to 60 days to get all 4 in and get the pile cap constructed. So there will be a lot of activity, for sure.
There certainly will. Kenny Grant, welcome. Thanks.
Hello, how you guys doing? Just wanted to ask again, this work, is that guaranteed or nothing sure yet as far as April 18th?
That's just the earliest possible start, Kenny. It could be basically late April, early May is sort of the time frame that is probably the more comfortable time frame for what Langen and HEC has relayed to us.
Okay.
The earliest possible date would be the 18th. That would be sort of mid-April, so it may wind up being later than that.
And I guess when it starts, whenever it starts at the earliest or when it happens, will it be a pretty consistent work for the next 4 to 6 months, or?
Good question. 45 to 60 days is the estimated time frame that we've been given for that initial set of piles and the pile cap to be constructed, and then that work will stop temporarily, that first initial foundation work will stop, and the excavation of mercury impacted soil will be the next field activity, and that will not start until after schools are out at the end of June. And the remediation in terms of the excavation of additional soil will proceed after the mercury impacted soil is completed. We don't have the remediation schedule yet, so we don't know exactly how long that entire excavation activity beyond the mercury impacted soil will be. We don't know what the duration for the mercury impacted soil will be yet. But there will be foundation work that will also need to still be completed. All that's being done in April, May, or started in April, May, is that first set of piles, that first cluster and first pile cap. But there'll be additional pile clusters and caps for the foundation. But we don't know exactly when that will take place yet. And I think the reason is because they're still developing and integrating the remediation and the construction schedules. That's very common. That's typical when you're integrating remediation into a redevelopment. You've got to have both the contractor for the remediation and the contractor for doing the subgrade work working together, and you need both of their inputs and both of their schedules. So I believe that's what's being worked on right now.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands up in our committee, but I see Elaine Kennedy. Welcome, Elaine, from the Seaport Coalition in Southbridge. Go ahead.
Laura, thank you for that report. Could you just qualify something for me? The lot timeline, the lot closes on 4/15, and they're going to put a occur prior to, will that occur prior to? Can't hear me?
Yeah, you cut out there for a little bit, but I hear you now.
Okay. Will the construction fence go up prior to them beginning work on the piles for the foundation?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And
actually, I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you, because that fence will, I think I mentioned earlier, the fence will go up, whether it's going to be the entire site or just the corner to quadrant off that work area is still being determined. But there will be that 8-foot high construction fence that will be surrounding the excavation needed for that first pile cluster, because they have to excavate down to 8 feet in order to start the piles, and then continue another 10 feet in order to construct the pile cap. But during that entire time, the camp will be in place, and that camp will be the camp used for the remedial design investigation. So it'll have all the changes to it that were put in place for the remedial design investigation, plus the second J505 that DEC requested, DEC DOH requested be added. So.
All right,
yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. I just had one other additional question, Laura, and I don't know if you can answer it, but I'm just curious from your experience, at what point does the sort of archaeological aspect of a site come into play during these excavations and pile drivings? It's never been clear to me, but that site, needless to say, was originally the waterfront of Lower Manhattan's port. So it is likely there will be indeed findings there. And, how does the community keep track best of this, and when do you think that would happen, where we would want to see a city archaeologist and a representative from the Landmarks Preservation Commission on board?
I think that's isn't that part of the approvals process? I mean, if there's going to be a need for that, I would imagine that would have to be worked out in advance of the work starting. But if something is encountered while they're excavating, I guess they're required to stop, right? I don't, that's not my area.
That is correct. And I'm just wondering, at this point, would this be a potential point where something could be found at an 8-foot excavation for these 4 piles?
Until we see a little bit more detail, because I haven't seen any plans or any of that. I mean, I would imagine that the dimensions of the excavation would be large enough for them to be able to see something. Even the test pit work that was done back in early February was probably large enough to be able to see something of merit. But, nothing was found there, I think, of significance. It was mostly debris. But I would think that this would be an excavation that potentially could encounter something.
Thanks
I mean,
very
it's hard
much.
for me to say.
Of course, thanks. Is there
Mhm.
anybody else with questions or comments? Otherwise, we'll let Laura go, but we will certainly be following up, hopefully very soon on, a more comprehensive understanding of what this means in terms of timing and impacts. Okay, looks
Right.
good. So we're going to move on to the second item on our agenda, which is the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency, the battery review and update. And this will be presented by Greg Sprick from Stantec and Amy Seek, landscape architect from Stantec. And I think Jordan Salinger is with us as well. I think he is. Anyway, welcome all and thanks. I guess Greg and Amy, take it away and welcome. Thank you.
And I'm going to say goodbye.
Hi, thank you. Welcome.
Laura, I'm remiss not to say thank you and goodbye.
No, it's okay.
Everyone's very eager to get going here.
Not a
Thanks so
problem.
much for your time and
great.
extraordinary
Absolutely.
review.
right.
We all
Right.
really appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, take care, everybody.
Okay, go ahead, Greg.
Do we have Jordan or Jennifer to open us up from EDC or NOR?
Greg, I don't see either of them on yet.
Okay. Steve, you're with us, right?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Hi, my name's Steve Nelson. I'm the project manager for this project from EDC. I've actually just pinged everyone to hop on, so you should be seeing them on shortly. We're coming here to you tonight to update you on our design and some new elements that we've taken into account for further protection. So I'm going to pass it off to Greg and Amy right now, and then we will be happy to answer any questions after the presentation.
Thanks very much. Welcome, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Hopefully everybody joins sooner than later. But yes, we're excited to be here tonight. As we have up on the screen, we have a brief agenda focusing on the parts of the project that have developed most substantially since we last met in September. These primarily consist of our two tie-in port points at the east and west end of the project, and then the river that flows two ways, the sea rail that runs the length of the waterfront esplanade. My name is Greg Spritch. I'm the project manager. I'm also a civil engineer with Stantec, and joined with me is Amy Seek, our lead landscape architect. And just to reorient everyone, I'll cover the project overview, and Amy will handle the meat of our presentation, our design updates. So many of you are familiar with this graphic, but just to reiterate, the battery project fits into the LMCR initiative. It includes these projects shown on the screen, which all share the common goal of protecting Lower Manhattan from coastal flooding and climate change impacts. We are talking about the battery here today. It's the tip of Manhattan, and we are specifically the 0.33 miles of that lower tip. And so the Battery Wharf is in serious condition, and many areas are closed due to safety concerns right now. And since this wharf has to be reconstructed, we're raising this wharf to protect the park from sea level rise inundation. And one of our primary objectives, as you can see in this boundary line, is to confine our limit of work as best as possible to the wharf reconstruction itself. Prioritizing keeping that footprint as narrow as possible will minimize as many disturbances as possible to the park's amenities, monuments, and trees. Yeah. Here's a handful of our other project goals. A few worth noting: we're preparing for climate change. We are supporting current site uses. That goes along with what I was saying about minimizing the wharf and construction footprint. Preserving the character of the park. That goes with the existing trees, the plantings, the landmark structures and views. And we're also very much trying to increase the universal accessibility of the wharf itself in our proposed design. So as part of that overall Lower Manhattan Resiliency Initiative, we are coordinating with the adjacent projects. To the northwest is the South Battery Park City Resiliency Project, and to our southeast is the FIDI Seaport Resilience Master Plan. Our project specifically is the design parameter is for 2100 sea level rise. That's shown in green, the elevation 11. That ties into the South Battery Park's Resiliency Project shown in pink at Pier A Plaza. And then on the southeastern side, that elevation 11 will tie into the future projects that come out of the master plan. Amy, take away the design updates.
Okay. So here we're showing just the big picture. It's hard to read any level of detail here, but just to say, we are going to talk about the Pier A tie-in and the East End tie-in. And I just wanted to note a couple of things that are visible at this scale, which is that we have finalized slip design and location. So for the 5 slips that are coming in, as well as it's possible to see here that in the current site, the wharf is blocked off by access to the for the secure queues accessing the vessels going on statue cruises to the Statue of Liberty. And in our current proposed design, we have optimized those standoff zones, allowing for circulation on the wharf itself with those secure lines. But going into detail on the East End tie-in, the intention of the East End tie-in, similar to Pier A, is to bring that +11 elevation that Greg mentioned around to the east end of the park to seal the park from sea level rise, with the same level of protections that are being provided on the west side and the wharf itself. And the topographic condition along the east end is visible here, where the lowest elevations are shown in reds and oranges and the higher elevations are shown in green. So you can see that the adjacent streets sit low, the View restaurant is sitting low, and then there's this corridor along the front, just behind the elevated wharf that is low, connecting to Castle Clinton. And that low area is the main area that we want to provide prioritized protection for, because there's the bosque itself, there's the cafe, the fountain that we want to be able to protect in this area. There are 2 breach points at the waterfront where the water can come into the battery. One is at the street beyond the extent of our project, and one is at the Coast Guard building. Looking at sea level rise for our design year, we can see that the tidal fluctuation will enter the battery through those points, but is not expected to enter significantly into the battery. But higher level storms, even today, would enter into the battery without that protection. So the alignment that we selected comes up along the east side of the View, the west side of the View restaurant, and protects the park from that risk without loss of trees or significant disruption to the function of the View restaurant. And any needed protections for the View would be dealt with through the concessionaire. So existing site photos show that west side of the View has a kind of broad area for integrating an intervention. And then as you move up towards the carousel, the grade is quite high, so there's not a need for intervention up here. The design in more detail is shown here on the right, with the existing shown on the left. The +11 elevation, so this whole wharf is elevated to our design elevation at +11. then that 11 protection comes down a sloped pathway and meets grade at the View restaurant. And then this wall carries those protections into a ramp. So this pathway goes up and over the flood elevation and then back down into the bosque to existing grade here. Those protections continue up in a low wall along this planter. So our goal here and what we've achieved is not to disrupt any trees. So no trees are lost in this proposal, and also not to have too much disturbance to the way that the View is functioning today. And let's see, we have an additional ramp going perpendicular to the waterfront here, meant to access the restaurant terraces, and then a vehicular ramp along this far east side. This will be vehicular as well as pedestrian, but there's a gate protecting vehicular access or controlling vehicular access. Here is a view of looking down on that tie-in. So the View restaurant is over here. Can everyone see my screen okay? The image?
Well, yes,
It's
except
a
right
little
now
gray. There we go. It's there.
Okay. I'm getting some error messages that there's some obstructions to the view.
There wasn't before, and it looks like
now
it
there
just
is.
removed, and it looks like it just
Came out.
cleared.
I'm sorry, so you can see it now?
Yes.
Yeah,
you're
okay.
good.
Okay, just let me know, please, if there's a problem. So here you can see the View restaurant is over to the right. That ramp that will be accessing the restaurant terraces is shown here. The low wall that emerges carrying the design flood elevation is shown here, kind of emerging as the slope goes down. And then these steps step down to the existing grade of the bosque. And so the bosque is here. You can't quite see the ramp that comes up and over and enters into the bosque here. Another view of the same general location, but from the ground, showing where you would enter into that East End tie-in path. And a view from within the bosque looking up to the elevated wharf with those stairs, the Gardens of Remembrance stairs. And you can see along this ridge line, the sort of elevation, that design flood elevation coming back. And here we're standing on the corridor with the view to our left, the View restaurant to our left. And you see up the corridor, so the slightly sloped pathway up to the wharf. And then this is that ramp that goes up and over the design flood elevation and back down into the bosque. So there are some changes to circulation that are caused by this scheme. So here we have this major pathway, the very broad pathway going alongside the View. We still have that pathway, but what we lose is this one connection that goes directly into the bosque from that major pathway. Because we're pulling that high grade in, we cut off that path. So that's a loss. Otherwise, we maintain the major gestures of the circulation, and something that was important was keeping the sense of the boundaries of this garden in the bosque, making it feel contained in the same way, the same sense of interiority there. Okay, going on to Pier A. The previous scheme that you saw was this. So we were showing that +11 elevation coming in along the tops of a stepped seating area connecting the wharf to the upper terrace of the Pier A Plaza. As we began developing this scheme further, we became concerned about a couple of things. One was circulation, just the degree of cutting off circulation from the existing, where there are a number of connections to Pier A from the Korean Memorial area. We worried about cutting off that circulation, particularly with the congestion that exists down here with the access to the boats. We also were concerned about the universal accessibility of the step seating, and so we wanted to provide seats with backs and companion seating. And so we changed our approach to incorporate backed benches and the protection being carried in combination with a low wall in combination with a vegetated berm rising up. And then we added a couple of connections. This one here, which is a ramped connection that comes from the landing of this ramp being built by the Battery Park City project. So it will rise up and come back down in line with the Korean Memorial. And then a stair connection, which is paired with this ramp connection up to the wharf. So you can see here the light colored connections are stair connections, and the darker magenta are ramp or universally accessible connections. And so we have maintained the number of connections to Pier A. And this is looking at it in a little bit more detail. You can see that low wall rising up the side of marking the perimeter of the battery and those connection points. And here again, a little bit more clearly, the berm carrying the protections and looking from the ground at those connections and the benches and where they meet the Battery Park City project on this side of the ramp. And this is looking down that vehicular ramp with the battery all along the left. And this is that new entrance connection. And this is the Battery Park City project. Then going on to the river that flows two ways, we looked at the existing condition, looked at kind of the detail of the way that the panels are arranged and the distance between the panels, and looked at a number of different approaches. And basically, we are maintaining that center bollard with a panel to each side, and then our goal is to reuse the wood top rail. But we're changing the spacing slightly, rather than starting with a single panel all the way down at Pier A. Our first panel will begin on just between slips 3 and 4, and they'll be grouped in groups about 27 feet apart between each bollard, and that's a change from the around 50 feet distance between each one, and they will be only contained on the part of the sea rail that is closest to the water. So with our new slips, we have a good bit of sea rail that's going inland around the slips. We will only have the panels along the actual waterfront, and the reason for that is that part of the concept of the panels is looking through the panel to the water. And some advantages of this approach that we can see are that that the panels being grouped close together and being very accessible will make them read more as a single piece. And this gives Castle Clinton space, and while the National Park Service is operating out of this location, it will maintain the accessibility of all the artworks for people to see. And then at the end, it's just a little bit of a detail that the artworks will occupy the tail end of one of the slips. So they'll just be inset a little bit more than the adjacent panels. Greg, do you want to speak to project timeline?
Yeah, sure. So right now, we wanted to come here today to present primarily the Pier A and East End tie-in updates. And along with that would be as part of as part of this meeting, we'd be submitting our PVC amended preliminary submission. The piece, the rest of the design is moving forward steadily. We're approaching our 75% submission. And we are looking to complete design in September of this year. And there would be the bidding and procurement process thereafter, and hopefully construction starting in 2023.
Thank you. Do you have more, or is that it? Should we open to
That's
questions? Okay, thanks very much. I just want to alert everyone that Diana Sweetai, our Director of Planning, has wisely put up in the chat a resolution that we wrote this past September on the battery designs, in case all of us need a refresher. That's where you'll find it. And I want to open it up for questions from any of the community board members, Environmental Protection Committee members first. Okay, that's a record breaker. No questions from anyone. Well, I have some. So
I'm Alice. I'll put me on the question. This is Wendy again.
Okay, Wendy.
I was searching still for the hand up and I couldn't find it. I'm so sorry.
Okay, not a problem. Again, please go ahead. Feel free.
So thank you for the presentation. I think that's, that was really helpful. It sounds like this is out of the scope of the project, but I couldn't help but notice that the Coast Guard was going to very much be in the, when you get to that slide, they're not doing so well. And I was just wondering how you are communicating with that site, and if the platform underneath is all one platform and you just don't chisel out their little piece, or are they actually separate underground? I mean, is it really a separate thing when you look at it from an engineering point of view? You just, it's like you don't fix that part, or is it really something standalone? So I guess there's pieces like, how is it engineering wise? And then the second piece of it is, are you sending them these slides as well? I mean, I'm sure they're sort of aware, but we had a separate meeting with Paul Goldstein and the Waterfronts Committee, and they didn't seem to even understand what we were talking about when we were bringing up some of these issues. And I was wondering, is that any of your purview? So thank you. And thanks for the presentation. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no problem. I can jump in a little bit. In terms of the engineering.
Sorry, Greg, I was gonna see if Jordan could answer that question. In terms of the Coast Guard coordination.
Yes, so as part of the broader FIDI Seaport Master Plan, there were a number of coordination points through that process. As you all know, just because the report is out doesn't mean the work is done there. And we will continue to have conversations about the long-term future for that site. Clearly, realize some of the issues that you alluded to, and some of the longer-term resiliency needs. And, quite frankly, for that project to succeed, there needs to be a tieback. So that is one of the areas that we're continuing to study. And so we'll have some updates on that a little bit in kind of future meetings, but realize what's going on here is slightly different.
So I just wanted to tell you that at least according to the person who's in charge of the kind of the coordination at the building day to day, certainly I don't think his job is the building, but his job is to notify anything that's happening on the building day to day. He didn't seem to have any idea what we were talking about. So just put that on your list of, that might be a little note for the future, but
we've had a number of conversations with their leadership, and Yeah, so as I think certain folks are certainly familiar with the work and the study that's ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
And Wendy, I'll just add that we have met with them about this project in particular, just to let them know, we're going to be working in the vicinity of their building, so they are aware.
And engineering wise, is it separate or is it the same?
Sorry, is what separate?
Is the platform, is the engineering of the you're going to be redoing the whole waterfront? Is that like a continuous cement pour or structural pour, or is the Coast Guard stuff completely standalone? I mean,
It's a separate structure.
The underground platforms are all different. Okay.
Maybe Stantec could point out where the Battery Wharf ends.
Yeah, so
yeah.
So I was going to jump in with this one. So they are two different structures, and our structure can be removed and reconstructed independently of the U.S. Coast Guard site, but we are coordinating that edge so that, of course, there isn't any separation or gap in the future.
Okay. And then one other thing, I was actually down there walking on this beautiful, last couple days. Is there any plans to put more signage to just say, what's coming, and to, explain to people, just educate the public about their waterfront and what's coming?
We were actually just discussing that recently internally. We don't have a set plan yet, but we're talking about doing some more on the ground outreach. So we'll come back to you when we have more of a plan developed.
I think that's a very good idea to educate the public. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the people who are actually visiting the.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in, Jordan, while you're on this topic of the Coast Guard, and that was my question too. And by the way, Wendy is co-chair of this committee, Wendy Chapman. Thanks, Wendy. That was really key. We've spent a fair amount of time in this meeting that Wendy described, talking about the site. And I guess, are you involved with the federal government in discussing the ownership of this site, or is it simply that this will remain the Coast Guard Maritime Center for many years to come, or is there some concept that this may change hands, or, could you give us anything on that? Yeah, that's a fabulously critical slide that shows just how vulnerable that site is. Well, if you go back to the East End tie-in site. But any one of those is pretty powerful as to how compromised that site is. And I guess, so that one question is, where are you, if anywhere, with discussions as to what would become of the site? And we spoke of most recently last week about the sort of wasted space of having placard parking of what's arguably probably the best view in New York City at the edge of the harbor in front of the Coast Guard building. And, I think it just seems like we all believe that that's a tremendous sort of waste of space at this point. And so I just wonder if there's any discussion about just kind of interim solutions to this area, both in terms of resiliency and just usability. And then second, do the plans that you've shown us, it's a little hard for me to discern, allow for access or flexibility to actually go around the entire front at some point of the Battery all the way to FiDi at some point in the future? Do these plans, where I see you have a ramp and it looked like there was car access, would that eventually, will that eventually be something that could potentially be open to the public to walk on?
So I guess I can take the first piece of that, characterizing the extent of conversations with the Coast Guard. I would say generally, in the preliminary stages, if you will.
Jordan, I lost you at least. Can anyone?
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Yes. Sorry about that. So the conversations are in earlier stages. we discussed the risks of the future risks of the site, and indicated that future study is our hope that we can partner to look at that site to provide potential resilience. They have not indicated one way or another. If at least I think they are open to the idea of looking at the site, but in terms of their intent, we know this is important use for them, and fundamentally, the city does not control it. So I think they're likely to be, the conversations will play out over years. But I would characterize conversations in the earlier stages, but certainly something that we want to explore and studying in future years.
Well, keep us posted on those conversations. I think the community board would like very much to be part of that because it's a site we all watch very carefully, and I'm sure the Battery folk do as well. So can you just zero in on part 2 of the question, maybe at the slide that gets us a little closer in at the view at that very quarter we're talking about? What's planned for that? And is there flexibility that would ultimately, I think it was one of the design pictures. Yeah, that one is, yeah, on the right. So can you just describe what is intended there and what could be intended if the Coast Guard situation changed in the future?
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, we are currently looking at this being our transition. So we aren't looking at the Coast Guard site or this area that is not within our project area. This is a DOT street. So the intention is that we would come down to existing grade and leave this very much as it is today, maintaining all the functionality of the view. So I don't know if you want me to describe the overall scheme again, or just that aspect about the transition.
No, so it will remain accessible. It says
yes, this
vehicle
will remain.
gate. I see something that's, yeah. So will people be able to walk on that, or is that just for cars?
Yes.
This is people and cars. So there's just a vehicular gate to keep vehicles from coming up here regularly, but people can pass freely. There's a gap in the gate. So people can pass freely back down to this area and through all of this. So there's no additional restrictions to pedestrian use.
Okay, thanks. And can you talk just another sort of major focus of this community board, which appeared in our earlier resolution, was the use of the national, park security tent, and the hope that might be removed and relocated. Is there any further conversation about that or movement towards that wish?
Alice, I'll let you know, we are accommodating the tent to go back in its original location in our design, because we don't have any further information yet on a permanent location for the tent. So so that our design can proceed and we make sure that the wharf is replaced in a timely manner, we're accounting for the weight of the tent in our structure.
And does Pier 25 enter into the conversation at all in terms of that suggestion that be used as a site for the ferries and such?
I'm not familiar with that proposal. I don't know if anyone else from the team.
You mean Pier A, Alice?
I'm terribly sorry. PRA. No wonder why you're not.
Okay.
You're not familiar with it. It doesn't exist. Okay. Yeah. PRA.
Again, it's not necessarily up to this project team to look at that relocation. I know NPS is looking at all different options, but just so that we can make sure that the wharf can be replaced in a timely manner due to its deteriorated condition. We've just accommodated for that in the structure.
Would these plans allow if things did move over to Pier A and the control happened over there? Would these plans allow for that to be accessed from Pier A? In other words, could you have the security tent
For them to have the security access at
Yeah.
Pier, or security screening at Pier A, and then the slips.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been coordinating with National Park Service, so they're familiar with the layout and they're taking all of that into consideration.
So that's a yes, it could be made to work.
I'm not gonna commit to that because it's National Park Service decision, but you know, they're aware of the layout of the slips, and we've been working with them on you know, how the security screening works and the queuing and all of that.
So basically what you're saying is a security tent going into that nice pink area that's shown, you know, you're working through all of that and not necessarily the other alternative of Pier A, that, you know, you're making sure it's going to accommodate their boats that go over. And I'm assuming you're also working with other boats that traditionally have docked here, and you're making it flexible enough for all different types of boats in the future to go in there, that, you know, you're adding in, you know, as much flexibility. And
Exactly.
I know you had some very clever designs in terms of how to get down to the water based on the tide. I mean, those things were very clever, and, you know, hats off to the design team for really thinking that through. I'm actually curious, if Alice, you don't mind me asking another question in terms of, you know, how much, you know, solar or renewables or any of this kind of stuff, or are we, you know, doing any low energy solar or wind, or, you know, I don't know what else is in here, because obviously you want to light this up as much as possible, but, you know, is it just normal, you know, LED lights?
We don't have any plans for renewables to be built into the site, but we have been focusing on the energy consumption of the construction project, and looking where we can reduce that.
I mean, is that something that you could think about, some solar or anything like that? Or is it just not, you know, sufficient in terms of standing up to the salt water? Is that the reason you don't do it?
I'll let see if Parks has anything to say about that for their.
I mean, the lighting, right now, the lighting that we're proposing are DOT standard lights that exist within the park now. I'm not sure if DOT has like a solar powered version.
I mean, I just kind of feel like, you know, across the way at Governor's Island, we're supposed to be putting a new climate center, you know, that the city's all excited about, and they're putting bids out to everyone. And, you know, since you're literally just doing this almost in the same time frame, that at least something could be innovative instead of just, you know, I mean, I love the construction, you know, if you're trying to save energy, but in terms of having something there that you can say, oh, well, New York City is changing for the better. I mean, I agree. You can't do some of the big lights there, but I'm assuming there could be something incorporated, but, you know, I don't know. I just feel like we need to keep asking that question. So, and I hope all of the things that we're buying are not coming from, you know, far away. I hope we're buying local and it's not being shipped from halfway around the world, but I don't know if you pay attention to that kind of stuff either.
Well, actually, a big part of our plan is to reuse materials directly on site.
And I did hear that, and that was wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Laura Starr, sorry.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Great presentation and elegant design. I wanted to go back to Alice's question about the tent and the possibility of it eventually maybe moving to Pier A Plaza and accommodating the circulation for that. And I'm just looking like, let's just say magically the stars align with our mayor and governor who are getting along, and our Democratic president. And like, let's just say this is the moment to get the tent out of our open space there, and move the security to Peary Plaza. Then, so I'm assuming people would like go into Peary Plaza, go through the security process, but then they would head towards the gangways by way of those 2 yellow ramps. And that would be kind of cordoned off maybe until you got to the gangways. And so what I'm wondering is about the circulation, if maybe, well, I have two questions about the circulation near Peary Plaza, getting from there into the park. One is, should there be a more generous connection near those ramps into the park so that you could, if that was ever cordoned off to get people onto the boats, you could somehow get into the park more fluidly there if you're just a regular person going for your morning run. And then the other, that little ramp going from the amphitheater steps towards the Korean Memorial. I mean, I think it would be more generous to have that ramp like flow into the ramp that goes more towards the oval, as opposed to emphasizing this like kind of dog leg into the Korean Memorial, which is, it's a kind of just, it's like, it's not so integral into the park, that memorial. And it seems like the idea is to really flow into the park, not towards that memorial. So I would say that was like the one circulation thing that maybe it could even be more generous, so that it's really more integral into the overall park circulation hierarchy. And then the other circulation thing is minor, but at the other end, at the part of the Bosque near the restaurant, is there any way to make that feel more generous, that connection? It seems like it's kind of a shame to kind of lose the curvilinear generosity that's been there. I don't know if there's a way to make that, like the LA, less formal, maybe have a little sweep to it, and then the entrance into the Bosque somehow a little more swoopy. I know you're operating with a lot of constraints there, and trees, and you're trying to preserve green and stuff. But anyway, those are my comments. I guess really the main thing is if we could all somehow, I know the people on this call are not making the decisions about the security tent, but I do think this is like, we're not going to get a better moment to get rid of it from this location with the politicians we have right now.
So this is Gigi from Government and Community Relations at EDC. I just, regarding the tent, we know that relocating the tent is a priority and something that you guys will not miss if it goes away. We are in the process of scheduling a meeting in the next 2 weeks with the Congressmember Nadler's office, and he specifically requested for us to talk about this issue. So I can promise you that the political side of, if it is possible, they have certainly expressed a desire to discuss what it would take and what those steps may be. So I think this, we're not going to solve this conversation now, only to say that if the forces and, the landscape, allows for it, it is certainly something that we understand is something that CB, this tent is something that CB1 will not cry over if it, gets moved or there's a better place for it.
Let me just say, it's not just CB1. Like during COVID, masses of people are circulating along the waterfront. Like people are coming all the way down from the Upper West Side and around and down through the park. And this is like the #1 waterfront location for New Yorkers. So, the idea of having this ugly security tent there is a travesty. And I mean, if there's anything the community board can do besides writing a resolution to help get the political muscle to get rid of it, we would be happy to do it. I really think it's critical.
Yeah, and look, I think that all of the elected share this concern. It's just that there are multiple agencies at multiple government levels that all have to work together, and lots of things have to come together for this
Right.
possibility to happen,
That's,
right?
we know that. Yeah.
But EDC will certainly do, what we
Okay.
can to, be part of the solution. We do not have, we don't have any sort of preference or not preference about the tent or no tent, right? We were given
You
a set of,
don't?
I hope you do have a preference.
I mean, look, we were given a set of parameters from a lot of different
Gigi,
agencies,
come on.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
we want you to lobby hard.
we are going to lobby. We are going to work very closely with our agencies and our elected officials, right? I think
I hope Homeland Security shouldn't win. It should be bigger than that.
it will.
Gigi, could we ask for a seat at the table? Could the community board have some representation, whether it's Tammy or Diana or one of us?
Well, the meeting is not just about the tent. It is an update on this project, and it's a whole entire sort of resiliency update.
Yeah, I was hoping the Coast Guard got included too. I was going to lobby for that.
Yeah. But let me circle back. We're almost done confirming the date and time, and so I will definitely reach out.
I think it makes a lot of sense because we've done a lot of work. I think many of us know a lot about it, and it might be helpful. So anyway,
Yeah,
I'm
and
lobbying for
Gigi-
that. And as to Wendy's point, the Coast Guard site.
And it
but
was confirmed that there's
thanks.
no boats.
Wendy,
ever
we can't. We
using the
got
Coast
other
Guard site.
questions, and we've got a long
No, I'm
list of
sorry.
people. So
Sorry, I'm a little hot on the collar for this one. I apologize.
well,
We got it. Coast Guard
Gigi,
building
thanks.
and tent.
Thanks for agreeing to get back to us about that meeting. Thank you.
Yep.
And thanks for the information. Okay, Bob Schneck. And thanks, Laura.
Okay, I suppose I wanted to start out by saying that this seems to me in this this whole protection of Lower Manhattan to be a kind of model project that's kind of happened with very high economy in a very compressed timeline, and really did a good job to kind of meet the criteria of this particular project. So just my first kind of question is, my impression up till now was Battery Park was supposed to flood, and then there was going to be flood protection on the other side by the road. Is this sea level rise separate from the storm surge protection?
Shall I answer that?
Are you asking the project includes surge?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that up till now, the planning I've seen has barriers up along the road, up on the top of Battery Park, and this provides protection right along the harbor. And
Right.
so you're saying that this is about sea level rise, but the other major factor is storm surge. So is this project meant to protect for both problems?
Yeah, so I can answer that. Amy, could you go to the slide that has the cross section?
Actually, that's not in this
I
presentation.
didn't have that one this time. Okay, that's okay. I'll just speak to it. So yeah, you can go back to the one that shows the overall. Thanks. What we've tried to do with this project is balance having a reasonably elevated wharf to protect the battery park. So that's what you see here. We're raising it to account for 2,100 sea level rise elevations. And then at the back of the park is Battery Park City project, which they'll be presenting shortly. And a future FiDi Seaport project will help also to protect the upland community. So this is kind of the interim measure to protect the park and the community from sea level rise without building a wall that no one could really see past. We're trying to keep some views in the park, keep people connected to the waterfront, while at the same time providing protections and replacing the wharf itself.
So this means that we're going to have a completely separate storm surge project going on the other side of the park eventually.
That's the intention, to provide some sort of protection in the back of the park as a second.
And then, has this been coordinated with the Army Corps of Engineers and the information that's come out of the HATS project?
I can jump in on that. We actually gave a full LMCR presentation, including elevations across all of these projects, and an update on the FIDI master plan to the HATS team a couple weeks ago now. So yes, we'll be fully incorporated into that HATS study.
And then, as always, my concern about this is that this well-designed project has breaches on both sides of it that are pretty serious. And this actually is going to be completed, it seems like, in a reasonable amount of time. The other ones are even pre-planning or even pre-politics and trying to determine what the solutions are. So especially obviously on the Coast Guard side. But are we going to see presentations for how this project ties in on the Pier A side next or soon?
That's the following presentation from BPCA.
And I just wanted to thank you for getting this done so quick and so well. So thank you.
Thank you. Rosa Chang. Next.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I always learn a lot at each one of these things. So I guess I had two questions. One, to piggyback on Bob's question. What happens between elevation plus 11 and elevation plus 18.5? Like what happens to the park? So I guess that's a big question. And then the second question is, I noticed that Wari is on here. So I was curious what her preference is on what happens with the security tent and the whole ferry thing, because I figure probably of all of us, she's the one who's probably spent the most time thinking about that precise question. So I wanted to get her input on that as well, please. And thank you.
Well, Wari was aware of this. We invited her and had some exchange. Wari, if you feel like saying anything, we'd love to hear from you. And if not, we certainly understand. But if you're here and you would like to respond, feel free. Okay. Well, and I'm not sure. I don't see Wari yet coming on, but feel free later. But perhaps the other question being answered by the team.
Yep, I can cover that one. So the area within the so from the battery reconstruction, the battery wharf reconstruction to the back side of the park where there's the coastal storm surge protection, the park elevates, the existing elevation of the park elevates quite substantially. So down in the Bosque area, elevations around 8.5 or 9. And then back at Battery Place and State Street, it rises several feet to 14, 15, elevation 16. So there will be, if a storm was greater than 11, portions of the park would flood. We are installing all new drainage within the lower bounds of our park, within the areas of the Bosque and within the areas of our construction footprint that is designed for severe storms. There's also protections on that, such as tide gates to prevent any surcharging of the existing network in the lower areas of the park. But for the most part, because the grade rises so steadily, especially in the oval and in the upper bounds of the park, there is not interventions proposed in that area.
Okay, and then what happens if the water breaches +11 and gets into the park? Like what happens to the park? What are we left with as a community as the ramifications of that?
If it breaches the wharf frontage, but does not breach the surge protection,
Yes.
is that sort of your question?
Yes.
Well, elevation +11 does provide a significant surge protection, especially from today's storms and even some of the future storms. If it were to breach the wharf, there obviously would be flooding from that event, and it would recede as the tide recedes, like any other flooding situation. All of our the trees and everything we're proposing are meant to be salt tolerant. We're designing our structures for flooding conditions, but of course, there would be damage and cleanup that would have to happen depending on the severity of the storm or the duration of the storm.
And thank you. And what does that mean in terms of just for us as a community wanting to utilize the park? Like what would be the sort of the period of recovery time or repair time, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
Rosa, I think it really depends on the size of the storm event, as Greg was saying. So there's some lower storms that, as Greg said, will be protected in the interim period, before the full sea level rise projection occurs. So, it's kind of on a case by case basis, depending on what size storm you would see. The bigger the storm, obviously, the longer it would take for the park to recover.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the last, but certainly not the least, is our former board chair and spearheader of all things resiliency, Catherine McVeigh Hughes. Welcome, Catherine. Catherine, are you there?
I sent Catherine an unmute request.
Okay.
So as long as she...
And that will be our last, I think. Oh, no, we have one more from Justine. And then I think...
Alice, this is Gigi. I just also have two other final things before we wrap up.
Okay, terrific. Well, why don't you get started while we try to locate Catherine?
Okay, sure. Can we just pull up the overlapping Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency slide in the appendix? So Alice, you had requested at one of our previous meetings to try to present a visual representation of all of the resiliency projects, sort of just back to back in timeline. So we have our first stab at that for you. We're just going to pull it up.
Gigi, you want the next slide?
Yes, it's just the one with all the bars. Yes, so here, is this what you were hoping for, Alice? Is this a little bit clearer?
It's great, whatever you can give us. Yeah, thank you. I think that the main focus was to have an understanding of all the projects at once. And so this is a good start. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll make sure you get the office gets a copy of this. And then I also just wanted to take a moment and say that we, as well as Jordan from the mayor's office of, make sure I get this right, resilience and environmental justice, we were are aware of your resolution coming from the executive committee around the coordination of all of these projects and open space, which I know is something that many of the CB1 members care about, and kind of wanting to use the LMCC model. And so that is something that, once it becomes the official CB1 position, we will start having those conversations internally about, what it would take to, put something like that into motion and sort of what it may potentially look like. So just wanted to let you know that we are listening in to all the meetings, even if we're not invited to them.
That's particularly good news, Gigi. I figured you would be, and that's tremendous. That would be a great step in the right direction. I mean, the more that we can coordinate all of this, I think the better off the city will be. And it's certainly not a community board one only focus, but of course,
sure,
this is really New York City we're talking about in the biggest way.
Right. You guys have the power of the resolution. So, and then Rosa, I owe you a phone call and I will call you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, are you?
Yes, thank you
Hi,
very
welcome.
much. Yay. I want to thank the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Team, New York City EDC, New York City Parks, and especially the Manhattan Community Board 1, chair and co-chair and members. And I really support your efforts on making sure that the security tent and the very long queuing line is properly dealt with. They are, currently the queuing line is blocking the most precious view of Lady Liberty. And we all know how precious democracy is, particularly now. So I just want to, support all your efforts to make sure that in the redesign and the resiliency efforts that this can be handled properly. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. I think, Justine, you're the last of our questions.
Thanks so much. I'm here, and I guess I just wanted to kind of follow up with what Rosa was asking and maybe what Bob was asking, and just summarize what I'm hearing, which is that
Justine, we lost you.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I got a call coming in. I'm gonna have to jump, but I'll be right back. But my question is, or my summary is, it appears that Battery Park itself is designed to flood. And I apologize because I came in late because I can't see how much of it floods. Like, does the new playground flood? Does the carousel with the seahorses and stuff like that, is that all designed to flood? Assuming the storm is high enough, right? I get that 11 feet is protected, but then at some point, if it's higher than that, that whole area is going to flood. That is what I'm hearing the Battery Park LMDC say. Am I correct or am I missing
it? Could you go back to the slides that show the breach points?
The breach points one.
Okay, the breach points. Yep. Okay. And it's my fault. I was late, so I apologize.
Right. Past it, Amy.
Yeah. Sorry.
That one, right? That. The breach point by the Coast Guard Center is where you're looking, and then I'm going to say north, but it's really east of the Coast Guard Center. And so those are the areas that will flood, is what you're looking at, including that, and that's where the restaurant is, right? Yeah, the view at Battery Restaurant.
Yeah. So as we were explaining earlier, in response to another question,
yeah,
the wharf is being raised to elevation 11 to balance, maintaining the majority of the park at its current elevation and maintain views and connections to the waterfront. And then a future project would, partially a Battery Park City Authority project that's going to be presented after this.
Mm-hmm.
And a future project would provide additional protection on to the community at a higher elevation.
But not at the water there, correct? We're talking about doing the protection closer to and you'll be protecting the buildings, correct? And life, but you're
yeah,
not protecting the park, right? Which is
the alignment is not determined yet, but you know, in the current condition, there's we haven't found the need to, you know, build a barrier at the waterfront,
yeah,
off from the park, from the water.
I appreciate the balance you're trying to strike, which is not just, you know, destroying the views and not destroying the water, right? I get that, and access to the waterfront. I'm just trying to make it understand that we really are sort of giving the park up to some degree for flooding, because I'm assuming the red is where it's really going to flood and the green is maybe safe.
Yeah, so there's very minimal.
Oh yeah, there you go. I see the numbers now.
Yeah, so what Stantec has designed is for the majority of the park be protected by the PRA,
Okay.
the wharf raising and the connections at PRA and the connections around the view. And then, but we did want to show that there's some minimal areas that may experience some
Severe flooding. Yep. If it gets
higher
Okay.
events.
All right. Thank you so much. And
Thanks very much. We're going to have to close this out, and we're going to sort of be moving just a little bit to the north, actually, on this topic. So more questions can certainly be asked at that point. But I think that is it. Yes, we did get everybody. So thank you. So thanks very much to the very large team that showed up tonight. Really appreciate it. You know, we would love to be part of the future discussions, particularly with Nadler's office on some of these key items that we're talking about, particularly the Coast Guard site and the tent site. And, you know, obviously we all want to better understand something that we brought up in our earlier resolution in September, which is just this, again, you know, why there's various elevations of protection at different points on the peninsula, and better understand why, which I think eventually will become clear, but probably isn't quite yet. And maybe will become clear during the next presentation. So I want to thank the, I guess you're the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency team very much for your tremendously helpful presentation. And I think we're not going to be needing to write a resolution, because I think our resolution states many of the concerns. What I'm proposing is that we write a letter, Tammy and I, to distribute to all electeds and interested parties to kind of update where we stand and highlight the same issues that we already highlighted in this resolution, and a few additional ones that have been noted tonight. So I hope that's okay with everybody. In lieu of yet another resolution, I think this probably is a slightly more effective and quicker way, given that our community board meeting is tomorrow. All right, I think that's it. Again, a major thank you. And I think we're going to move on to our third and last agenda item, which is the Battery Park City Resiliency Update, South Battery Park City. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night. And I think, I'm not sure if this is Nick or Claudia. I'm not sure who will be presenting on behalf of
Hey,
the
Alice,
authority.
it's Nick Spordone. Good
Hey,
evening.
Nick, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I'm not on camera, but I will be very brief, and then I will kick it over to the rest of the much more qualified team. I just wanted to thank the committee for having us here this evening, and I'm joined by a range of folks from our design team, including Rachel Denker from AECOM and the folks doing the design, which I'll turn it over to very briefly, as well as Gwen Dawson from BPCA, who's our Vice President of Real Property, Claudia Filomena, our Director of Capital Projects, Franco Marizzi, our Assistant Vice President of Construction, and Mr. Varun Kohli, our AVP of Planning and Design. So we have had a number of recent touch points on the South Battery Park City Resiliency project with the Environmental Protection Committee and Community Board 1 in general, including recently the January 24th LMCR quarterly update with some of the folks who just made the last presentation. So thank you for that. And before that, our DEIS public scoping hearing last October, following a number of project updates to this committee throughout the course of 2021 and the years prior. So we're back this evening with a couple of updates we know we owe you and promise to be back to you on, to include interior drainage for the project, construction staging. I know you want to hear some about that, and our final PDC package, which we sent over to the community board for review last month. So with that, and without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Rachel and the team to take it away. And I think, Diana, we may have the presentation teed up as well. So thank you very much. And Diana as well for being wonderful and always helping coordinate these things with great professionalism and aplomb. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, Nick, and thanks to everyone hanging out and bearing with the long presentations. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you. My name is Rachel Danker. I'm with the AECOM design team. Thanks for letting us be here and present to you tonight. Just wanted to take this opportunity to just give a quick round of introductions of the team members who will be walking you through tonight's presentation. Tonight, we have from our interior drainage group, we've got Helder D. Almeida. For construction staging, Laura Gray from the Lero group. And for the PDC final submission information, we've got Catherine Barsanti from our landscape team, Thomas Pfeiffer from our architecture team, and Ryan Connolly and Jean Pfeiffer also are on the line from our architecture team. And with that, I'll go ahead and move over to Helder to start the interior drainage portion of our slides. And Katie, you have control and everything, right?
Yes, I do. You guys can see the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, we can, but can I ask you to put it on full screen view, please?
Sure.
It's a little small.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, Helder.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Helder Almeida with AECOM and part of the design team for the SBPCR Coastal Resilience Project, working on the interior drainage. I think today we're going to touch upon the interior drainage aspects as they relate to a recent change to the previous design in terms of means and methods to isolate the interceptor sewer that crosses the project area, and that could serve as the means for surge from the adjacent unprotected areas to travel to the protected project area through that major deep interceptor sewer. So what we're seeing here is a depiction, a diagram that highlights what we're proposing now, which we're calling it the near surface isolation. And essentially, instead of isolating the interceptor at the interceptor level deeper underground, like we were proposing previously, now the approach is to isolate every branch of that interceptor sewer that can reach the surface. So we're going to, instead of keeping the water out of the interceptor, the surge from the adjacent areas out of the interceptor, we would allow the interceptor to surcharge, and we stop that surcharge at the street or closer to the street level before it reaches the ground and causes flooding. In essence, this is another method of isolating the interceptor, but simply we're not doing it at the bottom level or at the interceptor level. We're doing it closer to the surface. And we're going to use different techniques or different structures to accomplish that instead of the isolation gates. I think we could move on to the next slide. So essentially, the near surface isolation is going to involve interventions at each one of those branches that could bring that surge from the interceptor up to the street level. And there are 3 regulator chambers, existing regulator chambers, so that you see in this figure on the left. These are already in place because they're necessary to handle the combined sewer, the combined sewage that is collected at the combined sewers at the street level, and then during dry weather, it all goes and gets directed to the interceptor and then taken to the treatment plant. In our case, it goes through the Manhattan pump station before it reaches the treatment plant. For heavy rainfall events, when there's enough runoff to exceed the capacity of this connection to the interceptor, then there's going to be the called combined sewer overflows. So there's a portion of that wet weather flow that will make it through a combined sewer overflow outfall and reach the receiving waters in the harbor. In our project, we have 3 of these structures, and we are proposing to install or replace these regulator gates. So in non-coastal surge conditions, the function of this existing chamber, like I said, is to move a portion of the flow to the treatment plant and relieve the remainder that cannot be handled and send it to the receiving waters. During a coastal surge event, the interceptor is going to be surcharged at in the areas that are not protected by coastal resilience projects, and that surge is going to flow in the opposite direction and ultimately reach this chamber. If we didn't close the chamber here where we see that gate, then we would allow that surge to continue to propagate, go into the combined sewers, and eventually reach the street elsewhere. So this is a fundamental element, and we will implement a few of these regulator gates to reach that goal, to stop the surge before it moves upstream in this chamber and goes into the combined sewers. Another aspect is that this chamber is going to be subject to surcharge because we're stopping the surge with this regulator gate, but this chamber here is still subject to surcharge, and these chambers usually have access points for maintenance. So that surge could also reach the street if we were to not pressure proof any access point on the roof of these side of the chamber. So we will do that as well. And that can be achieved essentially through what we're seeing here on this image on the right. It's in a section view of essentially could be the roof of this chamber, or it could be the top of a interceptor manhole chimney. And what we are proposing to do is to install an additional lockable pressure-proof frame and cover that is properly tied into the existing structure so that it can resist the surcharge forces of the surge pushing upwards inside the structure, and then replace with another cover that is there to allow ventilation when the system is not locked and to support whatever traffic loadings are required. So this scheme works for either pressure proofing access points on top of this regulation chamber, or the manhole chimneys along the interceptor between these different regulators. So in the next slide, we're going to see where these things are located. So any chance we can probably zoom that up a little bit for, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to intervene at 3 regulators. These are existing structures like the one that was depicted in the previous slide, regulator M7, M8, and M9. We are going to install those regulator underflow gates if they do not exist. If they do, we will replace the ones that exist. And we'll also intervene at a sanitary emergency overflow chamber on West Thames Street to do the same procedure. In that case, there's no regulator gate involved. It's just pressure proofing the access points to that chamber. And we're going to intervene with those same pressure-proof inner covers at 3 interceptor manholes along the interceptor within the project area. They're not specifically called out, but here's one, and there's another one here, and another one here. So essentially, the near surface isolation is a method or an alternate method to isolate the interceptor instead of the interceptor isolation gates that were previously proposed, and essentially leads to the same efficiency in terms of ultimate flood risk reduction. Essentially stops the surge from traveling to the project area through the interceptor. And maybe next slide we can summarize the ultimate performance of the proposed near surface isolation. So essentially it leads to no mappable flooding within the SPPCR project area at the letter or map revision that will follow conclusion of the project. And the reason for that is because all the residual street flooding that would still be seen there would not average more than a foot depth within the project area. And with that, I will pass it on to Laura Gray, which will talk to you about construction, staging, and management. Thank you.
Thank you, Helder.
Thank you.
Everyone, again, my name is Laura Gray. I'm from the Lero Group. We're the construction managers procured by Battery Park City for the South Resiliency Project. And I'm going to speak a little bit about what the site will look like during construction for the Wagner Park reconstruction and the new Wagner Pavilion construction. What you see on the screen here is a high-level site logistics plan showing that, the park will be closed for the duration of construction. We will have 2 construction contracts in this area, 2 primes, one for the new pavilion building and one for the flood wall, the site work, and the park reconstruction. During the work, we have to maintain access, for the museum, and we're working with them to minimize impacts on their operations as much as we can. And due to the reconstruction of Battery Place sidewalk, for a portion of the sidewalk, it will be fully closed during construction, and we will be rerouting pedestrians, onto the roadway within a protected travel way. The anticipated site entrances are shown here in orange. Where we'll have, construction access and personnel access. Next slide, please. And, the site will be fully fenced. We will be required to put up the DOB fence and the DOB required signage. But Battery Park has, they've definitely expressed an interest in using some of this frontage as an advantage, installing some wayfinding signage, potentially some educational signage about the project. There's nothing really to show just yet, but that's something that's under consideration and being put together by Battery Park City. Next slide, please. And this is, just an image of, what the site will look like during construction. The museum access will be maintained, the main entrance. And you can see a rendering of our construction fence adjacent to the entrance. Next slide. And just some very high level information about construction of the work. We anticipate this portion of the project, that's Wagner Park Pavilion and Wagner Park reconstruction, to take 24 months. We anticipate the work to start in July. In general, we're working pretty much a standard construction hours, Monday to Friday, 7 to 3:30, Saturdays, 8 to 4. There will be times where we extend the shifts, depending on the circumstance of a particular day or a work activity. And there will be some off-shift hours, mainly just to lessen the impacts to, some of the stakeholders, primarily road resurfacing and some utility work. But for these packages, we don't anticipate much off shift work. And it goes without saying, flaggers will be present at all our entrances during deliveries. Safety is of utmost importance on a construction site. I did mention the pedestrian pathway along Battery Place that will be in place for the duration of the project. And lastly, I just wanted to mention we will have to shift, the bus stop in front of the museum slightly to accommodate the work. And we'll obviously coordinate with MTA buses and minimize impact as much as possible. And now I'll turn it back over to AECOM.
Great, thanks, Laura. So my name is Katie Barsanti. I'm on the landscape architecture team for AECOM, and I'm going to be going over some of the updates that we have for PDC and to kind of show you CB1 changes that you have not seen yet.
I'm just going to, excuse me for jumping in and forgive me. I just want to say to everyone, my goodness, there's so much information and we'll be dividing this into 3 sections. So we'll start with interior drainage, we'll go to construction staging, and then we'll come into design updates, and we'll take each set of questions separately. Because I'm getting a few texts from people that it's like they'd like to ask questions on each phase. Sorry, Catherine, go ahead.
No worries. Okay, great. So start with PDC, just some refresher. I think at this point most of us know the project site moves from the museum to Wagner Park here in the Battery. And this timeline is just kind of a compendium of all of the major check-ins that we've had to this point. Starting in 2018, where between then and 2020, there were a lot of larger public design meetings. And then we moved to, these CB1 meetings to show intermittent updates as we've been moving along in the project. Additionally, another timeline that shows our PDC submission history. This is, as you can see, a little bit more than what's typically required for, the PDC process, but with this project in such a large scale and scope, it was important to meet with them fairly regularly to update and move through the PDC process. So our last previous submission being February 2022, and then we'll be submitting again. So a lot of what you're going to be seeing today in these PDC updates are from this submission. The PDC jurisdiction for our site is for the museum is concentrated at First Place. And then it sits along the right-of-way, the public right-of-way and sidewalk at Battery Place, before then encompassing all of Pure and Pure Plaza and the Battery portion of our work. I'm going to go through just kind of really high level some of the comments that we've received from PDC to date, starting with our preliminary submission. This one was one where we got a lot of the larger design specific comments across the whole site. So for Pure Plaza, some comments on the security at the northern portion of the site, detailing clarifications on detailing for wooden seating, lighting, the maximizing use of solar lighting, and then providing details on the flood wall cladding itself and how that relates to the functionality of the actual flood protection and the gates that sit on all sides of it. And then for Battery Place, clarifying details on the sidewalk, materiality, and the planting along the sidewalk, as well as then direct access to the pavilion from Battery Place. And then with the Battery, a majority of the comments being about the trees, both proposed and existing, and additional details for the proposed berm. We went back then in May of last year with an amended preliminary submission. And in this one, we had addressed all the comments that they had provided in the previous one. And what we received back from them were essentially all comments related to the exposed flood wall cladding. They had expressed some concern about the design and how it would kind of come through based on the constructability of what we had proposed. And they asked us to come back with a scheme and details that show how to really simplify that and how it all works together and would be fabricated. And then in our submission related to this flood wall in September of last year, it was mostly positive, and most of these comments I'll go in more detail further along in the presentation, but it really came down to the stone type and the coping stone on top of the wall that they had some comments on. So starting in the battery with the Alberti marker, then at the beginning of the design for this project and with the battery, some of the design goals and requests that we heard were really to maximize the planted areas and additional trees that could be put in to preserve as many existing trees as possible, and to really root the design within the current character and materiality of the park. So, obviously in the battery, we have the berm, which is providing the flood protection with the flood wall within it, that then becomes exposed as the grade of the berm comes down. And then the flip-up gate then connects both sides of this exposed flood wall. And then we have our dedicated bike path sitting on both sides of the berm, and then moving into Peary Plaza before it crosses over to the Hudson River Greenway. So this graphic was what you saw in February of 2021. And what has changed since then in our final design is there are some additional trees that we were able to add in just through some design tweaks and constructability updates. We have updated the exposed flood wall facade, which you'll see soon. And then we settled on a location for the Alberti marker through coordination with Parks and their Arts and Antiquities group. And the Alberti marker location the Alberti marker is the only one that's going to be relocated in the project. All of the other ones shown on this map will be protected in place during construction. And the location for this one was really kind of rooted in a similar design as the Salvation Army monument over here, where it sits within this sidewalk and a pedestrian median between existing trees, light poles, and benches, so that it could be seen from all sides, and there's still plenty of access towards the front and the back of it. And we can see here that kind of a zoom in of that current marker where it sits today and why it does need to be moved. And that's just due to the actual flood infrastructure and the berm footprint that has pushed it out. So it's about 70 feet away from where it sits today. For Peary Plaza, again, just to go over some of the design drivers and what we heard, because this area of the project is the lowest lying and one of the lowest lying in this part of Lower Manhattan, it was really important to try to look for ways to really mitigate the height of the flood infrastructure, and at the same time look for ways that we could mitigate lower level storms while enhancing urban amenities and providing universal accessibility and safety within all of that. So that's what led to this idea of this upper plaza and lower plaza, with the upper plaza at this elevation 11 protecting against the lower level storms, but that also it allows these flip-up gates to have a lower perceived height than it would have if the plaza weren't raised. And then between the upper and the lower plaza, we have the terraced areas, which include ramps, stairs, and seating and shaded areas. And then on the north side of the plaza is the entrance, which also acts as security elements from Battery Place. So all of the planter walls are security walls, and then bollards sit between where porosity is needed for users and visitors to come in and out. So this graphic is what you saw last, which was in April of 2021. And some updates that have been made since then are some change in the tree locations and sizes, and this was due to accommodate service and emergency vehicle access from the street side to the lower plaza, as well as the upper plaza. The current planter that is down here was removed due to some of the extents of the battery resiliency project, but also access for multiple DEP service vehicles and FDNY ambulance turnaround space. And then the last thing is I'll show you the updated design for the historic bulkhead markers, which currently sit out there today. So this image on the left is what it looks like now. It's these stone bands that run through the plaza, indicating where the historic shorelines are. And what our proposal is that we will be salvaging both the stone that has the text on it, as shown in this image, as well as the stone that doesn't. Because the stone that doesn't will be salvaged and then text will be added to it. And these markers will then sit where it's shown in red in this plan, essentially along those same lines, just not in continuous bands as it does today. And that is just to not, essentially because there's changes in elevation and grade, these lines would be crisscrossing over a lot of that. And for safety reasons, we'd like to keep the materials kind of as consistent as possible. So these markers are still indicating the line in which they sit on, as well as then the text that that says what it is with the dates. Here's a rendering of that from the lower plaza, looking back towards One World Trade, West Side Highway. And we can see the markers here, ground, and then all of the terrace seating, ramps, and stairs in the plaza. Moving on to the exposed flood wall. Before I start, just wanted to kind of pull it back a little and go over some of the design drivers for this. And one of the biggest ones is the underpass through here, because it sits so close to finished grade currently. So that's the reason that we have the wall spanning over it. And then between that and then the wall that comes out of the berm, we have a flip up gate. And this allows not just pedestrian access in a similar location to where pedestrians can access the battery now, but also access for the stage deployment vehicle for events that happen within the battery. Coming in and out of the battery, we also have the bike lane that is dedicated in this area, as well as then within the berm. And then moving into Puree Plaza, there's access needed for emergency vehicles, DEP vehicles, and then deployment vehicles for the floodgates themselves. So that also dictated how some of these spaces and flood infrastructure pieces were placed. So starting from what you guys saw last in August of last year, the wall had two different stones. It was the Stony Creek, which exists out there today, and the walls around the peripheral of the park. And then Pearl Gray stone, which we have presented two different finishes, both the split face, which is similar to that Stony Creek that's out there today. It's much rougher. There's like kind of a lot of three-dimensionality to it. And then the water jet, which isn't quite as rough. It almost feels like sandpaper, but it has a lot of really nice color and actual like sparkles in it in the sun. And it's a really beautiful finish to the stone. And so this is that render that was presented then, showing in the battery how the Stony Creek was applied to the wall faces. And then as we move into Puree Plaza and Wagner Park, that Stony Creek starts to dissipate and turn into the Pearl Gray. The concept behind all of this was this idea of land and water. And so in the portions of the land, which are more towards the battery, this was expressed in extrusions from the stone. Excuse me. And then as we moved into Puree Plaza and Wagner Park, it was expressed as ripples of water. Some comments that we heard from the agencies and PDC, Parks was really concerned about climbing onto the wall from both the berm and from areas like Puree where you have direct access to the wall. So they really wanted us to look at climbability. What can we do to track that? How can we detail these extrusions to not allow that? They also commented that they really wanted split face towards the bottom of the wall because it has that rougher finish. It creates a lot more shadows on it, and that kind of allows it to almost like hide some of the dirt and things like that that will be getting on it, as well as discourage any graffiti or tagging. What we heard from PDC was that they requested the removal of the Stony Creek on the wall, and that was to allow the Stony Creek on the site to be more visually prominent in the foreground and to kind of reinforce the pedestrian scale of it, and then for the Pearl Gray to really be this singular factor on the wall and to not kind of distract between the two. They also requested that one type of kind of coping stone design be utilized across all of the wall faces, or sorry, all the wall tops, and for that not to change in different areas of the design. So after those comments, we went back, and the materials palette now still has the split face Pearl Gray, that rougher one. It still has the water jet, which has a lot of those sparkles, and then we introduced Pearl Gray Sandblasted, which, as you can see in this image, is a little bit lighter, but it too also had some of the sparkles of the water jet, which was really nice. And it kind of mutes down a lot of the variations within the stone itself. So this is the updated render of that. So we see this schist reference of the coping stone across all of the walls. We see down here where it's a little bit darker. You can see it up here in the key plan too. This is where those split face stones are. And then the water jet is towards the top. And then as we move, you'll see this in the following graphic, as we move into Peary Plaza, you start to get more of these sandblasted stone finishes. The idea really being that this wall transitions from darker colors towards the bottom up to lighter colors into the sky. And I'm going to go back to this render. Another thing I'll point out is that you can see a lot of most of the shadow lines that are moving this direction are on the bottom. And that's because we took those stones that were extruded and put a batter on them so that only the bottom of these stone units, you can see in these sections, was expressed, so that they're essentially, it created, it removed any handholds for anyone to climb up the wall. So there's nothing for anyone to grab onto or step onto to climb that. And this shows those units. The wall is made up of 12 basic units, both in single width. They're all 1 foot 6 inches. They're just extruded differently, and that's what creates kind of this variability in the amount of extrusion there is. And then ripple units, and these are where as it starts moving into Peary Plaza, it turns into this idea of water. They're less rectangular and they have more of this kind of ripple effect to them. You can see on the bottom the sectional quality, not just the handholds that are non-existent anymore, but also how, as you move, you walk up and down past the wall, how those extrusions change. Sometimes they extrude towards the bottom, other times towards the top. So there's this variability that occurs throughout it. And here I'll just go section by section. Starting with the battery, we see more of these darker stones, the split face towards the bottom of the wall, and then the water jet towards the top. And then as we move into Peary Plaza, similarly, we have the split face and the water jet, and then the sandblasted comes in towards Pier A, excuse me, and when the ripple units start to appear. Then for the column, we see those same 3 stones, far more sandblasted, both in the column and in the Wagner Park wall, within that water jet kind of sprinkled within there, so that you get these kind of like hints of sparkles throughout it to represent that water. And PDC requested that we create a physical mock-up, which we were excited to do, to really understand kind of the scale and what this starts to look like. And so we can see in a couple of these images the shadow lines that are created, and in this area where we see less of those shadow lines is when the the stones are more flat against the wall. And then the areas where we see more of those shadow lines are when those extrusions start to occur. This image up here is just showing the kind of distinguishing the difference between the actual flood infrastructure, the wall beneath it, and the cladding itself. And then down here in the bottom right, you can see how that flip-up gate then gets flipped up against it onto the seal plate, which you can see in the top right up here. This is where the flip-up gate itself seals against the flood wall. Then moving on to Battery Place, in the previous design, we had the berm that sits between the sidewalk and the alley. And then there are a few trees within there. And then we had these street trees running down the side between the street and the sidewalk. And these sit within planters as well as some cobble paving, matching what's out there now. And the one thing that has changed here is that these street trees, after kind of going back and double checking all DOT standards and offsets needed for utilities, street lights, signage, both wayfinding signage and traffic signage, as well as then how buses use this area, both in the city bus stop that's there and charter buses. It was determined that not all of those proposed trees could fit. So it went from groupings of 3 down to groupings of 2. You can see what this looks like then in this render, moving down Battery Place. There's 4 groupings of them. So from here, I'll pass it off to Tom Pfeiffer and partners to talk about the pavilion service entrance.
Hi there, everyone. It's Tom Pfeiffer here. I wanted to just show you kind of course, where we currently are. I don't think there have been any changes at all since the last time we presented this to you, but I think we can start the slides now. So this is where we were before we made the revision. This was a series of comments that I think you made that we responded to. And you can see here that we had a very dark stone, a very dark granite, and we had one expression for all of the doors, which I think then we began to speak about how the dark granite was cold and how the black doors were really forbidding just as an experience on the sidewalk. And also the way that they were just all in one plane here. Okay. And so then we did a couple of things. Number one, we recommended back then that we take this wall there and we make it out of the same warm concrete that we're making the pavilion above with. As you can see in the pavilion above, we have the red concrete. We have vines that constantly hang over the cornice, the top of the building. And here would be precisely the same thing, where the vines in the middle would hang over the red concrete and form not only a continuity with the pavilion, but also give that experience along the sidewalk a warmth. And what I love about what AECOM has done here is they've put these beautiful flowering seasonal trees in front of this wall with the vines hanging over. I think this landscape here will be a really an amazing way that this building greets the experience in the city. And then rather than having one big door, then we have made 2 smaller doors. The one to the left is the small one that goes to the restaurant, and the one to the right is the one that opens up into the maintenance facility. They're detailed precisely the way the one in the pavilion are detailed and precisely the same color. Okay? And so here is the color palette. You can see the redness of the concrete and the door. And then those little images there to the right are our proposal for the handrail. And we've worked to make the handrail as elegant and as transparent as possible. So all we have there are these little round cylinder pickets that come up out of the red concrete and form a very simple top. So that this thing, as you look at it, even from 10 feet away from the sidewalk, it is going to virtually disappear there and be very, very light-handed. So you can see people, you can see activity up on the little terrace there before you enter the pavilion. It's a very light gesture. We also tried to keep the wall as low as we could so that the scale of the sidewalk responds to the scale of this wall as being pedestrian friendly. So you can see the doors here. You can see these round elements here that are repeated from the 45 or 50 or so that we have up on the pavilion itself. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really a lot and very comprehensive, and thanks for the time. Boy, it's tough. There's a lot to see here. I think we're going to go do what I think is our best to do, which is to go back to the first part of the presentation, which was interior drainage. If somebody could just be on tap here for response. I'm not sure. I mean, we don't have all night, but I, for one, really don't understand this. So I'm not sure if we get another crack at it. I guess this is addressed to Nick and Gwen, but I've gotten quite a few texts to that, with that request. So anyway, one of the questions just is, where are these exactly? How big are they? How do they relate to the existing structures that are there? We saw 7 green circles on a plan, but there was noting of 3 new structures. Where are these used in the city? Is there something we can see? I don't know. That's just a few of the questions that I've been, seeing here.
Hi, Alice. This is Gwen. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Gwen. Welcome. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. I would suggest that we go back to that section and maybe we could walk through things a little bit more so that you can better understand the locations and what the appearance of these new pieces of equipment would look like. I think that the news here is quite good, that we were able to gravitate from the interceptor gate approach, which DEP has adopted on the ESCR and the BMCR projects, but we were through a very extended period of discussions with DEP and a lot of additional modeling, come to the conclusion that this near surface isolation methodology would provide virtually the same level of drainage protection and isolation as the interceptor gates would, without the extent of the construction and the intervention, and certainly without the control houses, the surface control houses, which I know were a great concern to everyone. So if these
Yeah,
The
we were delighted with that, of course, when nobody, the 70-foot long, 11-foot
Right.
buildings. Yeah, definitely an improvement.
Yes.
And that's great. It's just that this, we're not, I don't, if there's just no sense of scale to this, where they're located and when they're slightly elevated, how much so. And just to understand better, no one could, I can't imagine on this call could possibly question how they work, and if they work. We're trusting that you all have got that right, but I think people would like to better understand, at least I would, where they are and their scale and size, in the plan, overall plan.
Well, let's see, between Rachel and Helder, maybe you can provide just a little better context in terms of the locations, the specific locations, and the size and the appearance, because you virtually will not be able to see anything at the street level that would be noticeably different. So Rachel, can you help a little bit?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Yeah, I mean, I think the real good news here is that, yeah, you don't really see anything on the surface, which is, we should just zoom in, Katie, if you don't mind, to the map, so everybody specifically sees this information. So like you mentioned, we do have these green dots on the screen. That is specifically where we've identified that we need to do these measures. So we have, let's see, we've got regulator M7 at the very top, where you see right where West Street, there you go, Katie, right there. And then you move further down, we've got the interceptor manhole just below it. And then further down, we just follow that whole.
Just identify, see if you can identify the cross streets as you go down, so that people have a better sense of,
Can somebody just describe what it is that are at these places? Is this a manhole cover or a 25-foot grate, or what exactly?
Thank you, Alice. That was what
Right. Yeah. I don't want to
insist that we are provided with that.
Okay. We
Okay.
do have Helder from our interior drainage, who's the real expert, but I would call them, yes, they're basically manhole covers. But I don't want to be oversimplistic. So Helder, can you shed a little bit further light of detail of specifically what these are?
Yes. So these are essentially manhole covers, and they're along the interceptor. When those that are labeled interceptor manhole, the three ones that are labeled interceptor manhole there in this figure are existing 27 to 30 somewhat inch standard DEP existing manhole covers that sit on top of a chimney that ultimately connects to the interceptor down below. And the scope of the intervention is to just replace the cover with a cover that is lockable and can resist the upward pressure of the surge that will be inside the interceptor. So at the end, the street is just going to look the same as it looks now, and that's what it is for the regulator structures, like we showed in one of the other slides that had the nice graphic, the picture. Yes. So on these are existing chambers, and the size of that chamber.
This is all subgrade.
Right. This is all subgrade and it's existing. And the size of that chamber where the regulator gate sits, I would say that it's at most 15 feet long by 10 feet wide. So, but the scope of the intervention at these chambers is to install a regulator gate, which in some cases is already existing. We're just replacing it in kind, in a way. That will be closed ahead of a storm surge and then opened up again after the surge, so that the system goes back to normal function.
These are flush with grade. I'm not sure I understood the near surface isolation. I assume, are they at surface? If you go slightly to the right of your diagram, to the right, you show it slightly. It looks like there's something that's raised above some sort of level. I'm not sure what I'm looking at here. I mean,
yeah. So
all section, but
yeah, this outer cover is going to match existing grade. So there's no nothing will be protruding from the ground, or there's no significant regrading involved with this approach.
Well, I don't want to hold you up, so I'm gonna, just ask that you provide us with whatever additional details you have that will show an actual map of these in plan, to see the actual, scale of this, if you don't mind, providing to the community board, that would be great. And whatever additional drawings might be helpful, just to fully understand where they are, the size of them, and that would be great. Okay, I'm gonna call on Laura Starr.
Hi, thank you. So my question is, so this is dealing with like storm surge and backflow prevention, right? Of the sanitary or like the combined sewer system. Is that correct? That's the point of this?
No, essentially this is just precluding the surge that will enter the interceptor in the unprotected adjacent areas that do not have yet a coastal resilience project. So at the street level, in those unprotected adjacent areas, the coastal flooding waters will be able to enter the system and surge.
Right. So this is about the coastal waters, but what happens when there's a cloud burst or a heavy rain? Like what happens when this barrier system that the landscape architects have been showing is up, right? And then there's a big rain. Like what happens to the water, the bathtub effect of the storm water behind this system?
It leads to residual flooding induced by that concurrent runoff. However, through modeling, it has been determined that that street flooding does not exceed an average depth of a foot for each individual pooling area, so therefore is not mappable in the final firm map or letter of map provision that goes with the project.
Well, how can you show us, like in like an storm like Ida, and with this barrier system up, what that would look like? And how will the water eventually drain? And how will that impact people being able to move? Like, let's say there's a hurricane, let's say there's the storm surge and an Ida, right? Then, like, what's going to happen? How do people move? What is life like?
Well, there's
Heller, let me,
yes,
it's Antoine Ebidargam from AECOM. So the design criteria couples a storm surge with actually a certain level of rain. And through the modeling that was done, a lot of the rain that actually falls while the barriers are up collects in the low-lying areas in front of the entrance to the Brooklyn Battery. So you almost have, in this situation, you almost have like an existing storage tank that really holds that water until it gets pumped out. So you end up with very residual flooding on the streets because of the nature of the grades, and then you have a place where water can collect. So that's really what happens in case of a storm coupled with a rain.
I see. And then how does it eventually, then when the storm
eventually when the flood recedes, you reopen the gates
everything and it drains.
And then exactly.
Oh, okay. And what is the design storm? Is it like a Ida type of, like a cloudburst major storm, or what are we talking about?
No, it would not be an Ida. I think the design criteria, Helder, help me jump back in, please. Is it a 2-year rain with a 100-year storm?
It's a 5-year rain
5-year. with
a 100-year surge, concurrent, yes.
The probability of having an Ida coupled with a flood, 100-year storm surge is extremely unlikely. And that's really what you it's a probabilistic.
Right. But the thing is, right. It could, it's okay. I mean, I guess I'm just wondering if the gates are closed for whatever reason and there was an Ida, I mean, I know that the people think of Ida as a fluke, but you know, if you talk to Klaus Jacob and some of these other people on the city's resilience, you know, think tank team, they talk about how these events that are like 1 in 100 now are going to become like, you know, 1 in 5 or whatever. They're going to be more frequent and more more extreme. So I just want to make sure if we're spending all this money, that
Right.
it's really, you know, that we're not just going to put the community in some kind of incapacitated disaster in heavy rains, because those may occur more than the storm surge.
Right. So in those situations, I mean, you're actively closing these gates and putting them up. So unless there's this storm surge coming, you would not be raising any gates or closing any of these interventions that we're describing here. So the system would still flow the way it is. You would only activate these, manually deploy them, and lock these manhole covers and pressure proof and put the gates down inside these regulators and flip up the gates only when there's a storm surge warning and a storm coming.
Okay. And the operators of that system is DEP, or it's the Battery Park City Authority, or who's operating all of this?
I think it's still in discussion. Gwen, is that fair to
Yeah,
say?
we've been having a lot of discussions with DEP about how the allocation of operating and maintenance should be handled. And I expect that we'll have a clearer answer to that in the next month or so.
So will you have that answer before you start construction?
We'll know that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks all.
Sure.
We have 2 more large areas to cover. So Justine, a quick one on the.
Yep. I have some. So talking about this, this right here, right now. So where is this? This is in the street, on the sidewalk, or a combination of both with the manhole covers? Ish.
Yes, all the manhole covers are along West Street, Route 9A, because interceptor already, because those have to be exactly where the existing interceptor is currently located. And then the regulator chambers some of them are also on top of the interceptor, M8 and M7. M9 is slightly to the west, and it's on the promenade, so the bikeway.
The
But
sanitary emergency overflow one is on the bikeway, right?
No, the regulator M9.
M9.
And the sanitary emergency overflow is on the sidewalk on West Thames.
On West Thames, right by the kids, by the playground, right?
Correct.
And that's underground now, or that's kind of gross. Sanitary emergency overflow would be sewage.
Yes, but it's always closed. It's never releasing any sanitary flow. It's just in the event of an emergency, it would be a point to relieve the system in case it's necessary. To my knowledge, I don't think it's.
So there's no way it can come to the surface, is what you're saying? That's underground stuff?
Yeah, this is all existing underground. They have covers at street level.
Well, yeah, but like, with surge, I guess, Gwen, I'm going to ask you, you know where that is, and you know what I'm talking about, that there's the kids' playground there. It's
Yeah, Antoine, maybe you can.
Yeah, that's what we actually are doing. We're closing it so nothing will come out from the underground up into it. So that's the whole purpose. That's the goal, is really to lock in the waters outside of that are from the outside of the area, to just lock them in and prevent them from
and
coming
keep
up
them to go someplace else.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then I'll be quick because this goes to kind of what you talked about before and what you're going to talk about. One thing that we really would like, and it was really amazing, was for the North neighborhood and the West. You all did a walkthrough where you had like the poles to show the height, and you went through and really pointed out everything along the way and gave us a real visual understanding of what was going on. Would that be possible? We're asking you to do it for the South
We're-
project.
We're already planning that, Justine.
Excellent.
Actually are hoping to target sometime during Earth Week.
Okay.
To schedule a walkthrough of the site that gives folks a kind of an up close picture that we can have those devices, the poles or whatever, and
Yeah,
illustrate the elevations so that people have a really good sense of where things will be, what the changes will be, what the elevations are. We can go through and look at each of these locations where the manholes are, so that it's
That would be so
That's great,
helpful.
Gwen. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I wanted to follow up with that, and I'm glad you're identifying Earth Week. If you can give us the dates as soon as possible, I think you're going to need more than one tour, much like
Yeah.
we did for the North and West,
Mhm.
so that we have plenty of opportunity. And
Yeah.
also, if I can ask for the follow up on just slightly more detailed plans, so we know where these 7 green circles are located and
Yeah.
their scale and size.
Sure.
All right, I think we're moving on to construction staging next. Okay. All right, any questions on construction staging from the group? I don't see any hands. Well, Justine, your hand I see. is
Yeah,
still
no,
up.
my hand's still up. It's still
Oh,
up, and if I could, I'm gonna take it down, but I'm gonna just ask, because I think I missed part of it. With the staging, it's gonna start in spring, right? And we're gonna have this, the park will be closed off? I'm sure you've asked the question, so I don't want to repeat it if you've been
Well,
asked and
yeah,
answered.
it starts on July 2022 and it ends in July 2024, if I have that correct.
That's what I thought I saw on the slide. And then all of Wagner Park will be closed.
Yeah, and just something that we didn't really touch on in that section is that this is the first part of the construction that we're looking to start in July. The Pier A Plaza Battery section, that section will be later in 2022, in late 2022 in the fall. And then the interior drainage will also be in that same time frame. So the overall duration of the construction of July 2022 to July 2024 will encompass all of the construction staging, but we are starting, and Laura was great in walking through the staging of the Museum of Jewish Heritage and the Wagner Park section, since those areas will be first. But we'll come back with you. We'll come back to you with the staging for the future phases of the project as we get a little closer.
Can you put up the slide that shows the plan, please?
And as you're doing that though, and as you're pulling it up, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and 8 a.m. to whatever it was, that's really early starts, because there is residential, right? You've got the Wagner, Ritz-Carlton Wagner, you've got the other building that's there. Plus, when you get by the Battery, I don't know the names of the buildings, but there are residential buildings that are there. That's early to be doing construction work, right? Can we push it back? Did anybody ask that question?
Yeah, I think those are pretty standard construction hours. Laura, we'll have to discuss whether there's any real flexibility there, or whether that gets us into a problem with productivity.
Those are standard straight time hours for the trades. You know, when we work in residential neighborhoods, we do our best to be as sensitive as we can. But those are going to be the hours for the project.
It's going to be tough. You're going to be getting a lot of complaints. I think we'll have to talk about it in my committee a little bit. I hear you.
We can,
and yeah, we can talk about it. I'm not going to waste the time now because you're talking about the design, but we should also talk about funding for all this.
To Laura's point, I think that, you know, there's usually an attempt to try to if possible, push back the really noisy work to a little bit later start, right, Laura?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sure. I mean, you are talking about 2 years too, so it's going to be a lot of disruption to the people that are there. But
Yeah, again, I'd like to ask if we could have more detail on this, like how long the Museum of Jewish Heritage is entrance will be compromised and how long is that for? What is the proposed?
Their entrance is not compromised. The entrance to the museum will be as it is today.
So I thought you had mentioned they would have to close during sidewalk work. Maybe I misunderstood the Battery Place work. That's not
You can
accurate.
go down, if someone can click the slide down to where it shows the main entrance, I'd appreciate that. That one, yeah. So this is what it'll look like, for the duration.
Okay, so it will never close. They don't have to close.
No.
Okay. Is it possible to going back to that other slide, just again, so much can be solved in some just basic plans. Is there a plan that can show where the protected pedestrian path and the MTA bus will go? I mean, are any changes to that? Just, for example, how one will now walk from the northern part of the park down, like what will be the route that, for your average goer, and then how that gets, completed down into the Battery, dovetailing with the work that's being done there, like just sort of a pedestrian and bike path plan that perhaps you could provide that would indicate how that's going to resolve itself for the next 2 years, so people actually understand where they would go.
Hey, Alice, I think we could do that.
That would be great sooner than later. Thank you very much, Gwen. I appreciate it. I think it'd be helpful. And I know that'll probably be taken up, as Justine said, in the Battery Park City Committee with more detail. That's Justine Kucha, chair of that committee. Anything else on construction staging? I see Wendy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I was wondering, are there any plans to, I was just there again, and I actually told tourists that were there, take a lot of pictures because this is all going away. And they looked a little shocked as a stranger telling them that. I keep thinking that this beautiful place is our Penn Station of sorts, and I've gotten comfortable with it has to be done. But I think there needs to be more of like a formal, goodbye and signage. And I know you hinted at signage, but, I'd like to know more about what we're doing to say goodbye to this beautiful space that many of us, enjoyed for, a good part of our, the decades here. And is there going to be a ceremony of, closing it down and, explaining why we have to, get rid of this and do something new for the next stage of New York City, which, is that something that, I mean, this all seems very technical, but I find this very emotional. So, I mean, maybe I'm the only one, but I'd like to have something on that level.
Hey,
Thank you.
Wendy, we are definitely going to be doing a lot of photography of the park. That's part of the work that AECOM will be doing in documenting the park. We also we heard your suggestion earlier, and we are looking to start probably at the beginning of May, posting some signage, some educational signage around the park, letting people know what's coming and explaining what that's all about, and why we're doing it, and more about resiliency. We had not planned a ceremony per se, but certainly open to the suggestion. But it's not something that we had planned at this point.
Well, I have to say, I was just there this weekend and it's so beautiful. It's just, it is very emotional for me. And I did go up to complete strangers and say, take this in. It's not going to be here in a couple of years. So, you know, I don't know how anyone else feels. Maybe that's something to be discussed at the Battery Park Committee and not at the environmental meeting. But I do feel like the neighbors are going to want something more
To
emotional.
commemorate it. I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea, Wendy. I think it's a
Well,
great
and
idea.
the timing coincides roughly with the Midsummer Festival that's normally takes place in Wagner Park at that time of year. I don't know if some combination and what you're going to do about Midsummer when it's under construction, as a matter of fact.
Well, it won't be
Yeah.
under construction for the Midsummer Festival.
Not this year, but next year.
Right, yes, for this year. But it's a good thought. It's a good idea. And Nick, are you still on? I think he might have gone.
I can't tell, but I can bring it up
Okay,
to him too, Lynn, and you remember too. That's a great. I
Right.
think
And
it's
maybe
great
that's a
idea.
battery
Okay,
park.
I'm going to ask people to just raise their hands. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, Wendy. I certainly feel like you do. I go every day, and it's a to me it's a tragedy. I have to say, I'll go on record, and I have one on record. But and in any case, I'm glad that you're entertaining ways to make it a little less tragic.
Hey, Alice, I'm
yeah.
sorry. This is Nick Spordo, and I was
Yeah.
in a vehicle, and my service went in, and I apologize. What was the question? I saw Gwen was asking something of me.
Yeah, there was a suggestion that there might be a way to avail ourselves of the Midsummer Festival to have something that would be akin to a goodbye ceremony for Wagner Park, and I said, you know, I thought that was a good suggestion, an interesting suggestion, so that is something that we should talk about and then follow up on. And I was asking you if that's something that you could maybe take the lead on.
Yeah, for sure. I can follow up with Craig and the team. For those who are unaware on the call, Midsummer Festival is an annual celebration we do in Wagner Park with the Swedish consulate to celebrate the day of the year. And it'll be one of the events that happens in Wagner Park this summer before construction begins. So sure, yes, we can circle back with the consulate and the team here, and it seems like might be a really nice touch point to do that. So for sure, I'll follow up, and Justine will be back to you and Alice accordingly.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So I think we have two more questions. Let's not forget that we also really want to look at the design update. So much to cover in one evening, but that's what's before us. So Betty Kay.
Excuse me, thank you. I was going to ask about, everyone's talking about the sidewalk, which I appreciate the importance of, but I'm talking about the promenade. And it looks like on the picture, a portion of it is not going to be part of the construction site, but is blocked from access from the north or the south. Is that true? So the promenade will kind of cut off at South Cove?
The Esplanade?
Yes.
Yes. Laura, maybe you can talk about the location where the Esplanade will not be accessible south of the point of the construction perimeter there on the north.
Yeah, so that area, you know, just very uncomfortable with having, you know, people behind there, you know, just concerned as a safety issue. But this also, we need a place to, you know, stage the contractor while the work is being done. So this area will be used for staging of the project.
I think that underscores the importance of the earlier request from Alice that we provide a more detailed pedestrian path map to really illustrate how pedestrians will need to access that area and what the essentially the detour will be.
Yeah, and I think when it's
I can't hear you, Betty.
Sorry, right through the Battery and with the bike path as well. Thanks. Sorry, Betty, go ahead.
Especially since there are a lot of fishermen that go along that stretch that looks like it's not the work area, but it's blocked at both sides. So there can be some notification for them
That's a good idea. I think we should.
Okay, thanks, Betty. Good points. Rosa.
Thank you very much. So just in relation to the timeline, it looked like the Wagner Park area was going to be under construction from 2022 to 2024, but I wasn't clear. Were you saying that the connection project to the battery was going to start in 2022, but you didn't know the duration of that project, or is it also concurrent with the Wagner project?
It will start later, but it's projected to start later, but finish it at approximately the same time.
Okay, so then theoretically, all of that work should be completed within a 2-year span.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
So I think we're going to move on now to the PDC design update questions, if that's good. Okay, so this is the last part of the presentation, and do we have any questions on these items? Okay, well, I see two hands. Bob Steck.
I just wanted to just learn about what seems to me to be an important principle, and that is the principle of protection against sea level rise, which seems to be directly along the Hudson, and then the protection for storm surge, and they seem to be separate. And there's conditions under which there's flooding in between the two. Is that true? Is that generally true in just the design along the perimeter of the Hudson?
Antoine, if you're on, I'm going to ask you to answer that, because the existing elevations at different points along the project area are different. And so when we're talking about the sea level rise concerns, those are most pronounced in existing low-lying areas such as Pier 8 Plaza. But Antoine, maybe you can take that.
Yeah, yes, Gwen. No, basically the protection along the Hudson is really designed for the future sea level rise. So it's all along that path. I'm not sure if maybe the confusion was due to what you heard about the Pier 8 Plaza, the lower plaza and the higher plaza. The lower plaza will, with sea level rise, could get inundated with time. But the upper plaza is where the protection is, where the alignment is. I'm not sure if that's the question that you're asking.
I think that's what I wanted to do is find out if that was the working principle. So it seems to be that we're going to be raising the height along the waterfront edge, and we're going to be adding a seam of flood protection for storm surge. So there's going to be two things going on here.
So we're raising the upper level and adding the flood protection on top of it to minimize the impact on the height of the gates. So you really kind of, the area to the west of that is really could potentially in the flood, in the storm surge, could be inundated. Meaning, I don't know if
The Esplanade along Wagner Park and where the museum is significantly higher than the Pier 8 Plaza is. So that there is less concern about a regular tidal inundation along the Esplanade in the Wagner Park area than there is at Pier 8 Plaza. That's why I was saying that the existing levels of the existing elevations really do inform kind of what the overall strategy is for the storm surge protection and sea level rise protection.
So there was another when you look at the Battery Park section, then that there's some reason that we're going to raise the height of the waterfront protection for sea level rise. Right. And it appears as though in the Wagner Park section, we're not going to raise it because it's sufficient And then when we go around to the Battery Park City section, then is that going to be up? That's going to have two sections. That's going to have a section next to the Hudson and the section that protects against storm surge farther in. Is that
Not
that's the
necessarily.
working
Not,
principle everywhere?
not necessarily. What the work that AECOM has done is really been focused on doing the coastal modeling, understanding the nature of the risks from storm surge. And in some places where the existing elevation is particularly low, like in the Peoria Plaza, but also along the Battery Wharf for EDC's project there, the determination has been made that with sea level rise over time, that there could be regular inundations, tidal inundations there, even in the absence of a storm event. And so being able to raise those areas to the 11-foot level would provide some risk reduction there for sea level rise. But then that's been coupled with the storm surge barrier protection. As we go around Wagner Park, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and the Esplanade, the coastal modeling projections for what is needed, the design flood elevation is really focused on the storm surge, because maybe Antoine, you could talk about what the current, the comparison with the current elevation of the Esplanade here versus Peoria Plaza, so that there's
Right.
that's clearer.
Right. So the current elevation at Peoria Plaza is around 5.5, 6 feet, and the Esplanade is around 9. So you right there, you have 4 feet difference. And I think as you wrap up around the Battery Wharf, that's also changes back to about 7 or 8 in certain locations. So it varies along the length of the project, and that's the layered protection. The surge or the storm surge in a 100-year storm, that line, that is what we refer to as the alignment, protects against that high surge of 17, 18, 20 feet or so. And then the low-lying areas are protected against sea level rise by just raising. Some of them are protected just by the nature of the elevation they're at. And at the Pier A is what we're kind of creating, that tiered approach, so you can get some protection against that.
So all along the Esplanade, from say the Winter Garden all the way to the Coast Guard station, different sections have different needs for sea level rise protection. And so the first protection, the first perimeter along the Hudson is kind of set by standards, and those standards come from the Army Corps of Engineers and the HATS project.
It also comes from modeling. I think we've done coastal modeling to predict what sea level rise will be at those locations and how it will impact the tidal water flooding.
So each one of
it's
these
both.
projects is doing their own modeling for this, and so that's kind of how we arrive at these decisions.
I mean, we're doing the coastal modeling all along that Battery Park City, the coastal line. So that's all in one model that AECOM has done.
You're right, Bob, that each of the projects does its own coastal modeling, but that's not to say that they're not coordinated together. So there is a common benchmark objective for the storm surge protection, and that is the 2050s, 100-year storm, and the 2050s 100-year storm. So it is incumbent upon each project to determine what the level of the design flood elevation is and the height of intervention is that's necessary in order to meet that common standard among all of the projects.
And,
Yeah,
and
I
they're all
just
based on
have a
a
little,
specific sea level rise.
I'm going to give this
I
another
just,
2 minutes. It's yeah, because we've got more ground to cover. Go ahead, Bob.
I just think it's an important issue because if you built, for example, the battery park section just a little bit higher, you might actually control more flooding into the park and beyond the park. But that's just a concern of mine. So thank you for the chance to ask it.
Yeah, no, it's a
Sure.
point that has been raised so many times for years that it just isn't crystal clear to anyone as to the sort of discrepancy between the different agencies and the different approaches. So I appreciate hearing it again, and you asking, Bob. Thanks. Okay, Laura.
Okay, very briefly, back to the earlier question. I am hoping we could see the stormwater modeling and the evacuation routes. If if you could present them at the next meeting, I think that would be great. Just so that, wait, is Rory speaking? I can not. Okay, anyway, I think that would be great to see. I have a couple of comments about the design. So I know we now have a new mayor and governor, and I'm just, we were told that we had to have the berm because the previous parks commissioner was concerned about parks without borders and having a wall. But as we can see from this presentation, there's a pretty mighty wall happening anyway. So, why not just move the wall out to the sidewalk, per some earlier suggestions, and save the Battery Bikeway and the trees and the integrity of the park. So I guess since Parks is on this call, I'm just hoping that maybe now that we have a different Parks Commissioner, we could revisit that. That's one comment. And then the other comment is I just want to register again that I really disagree with the entry system to the restaurant pavilion, and I think it's a shame that you have to enter from the two wings and you can't enter right under the building. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Laura. Can somebody answer the first, which is a question, which is can the battery berm be revisited as a condition?
I certainly can't speak for the new Parks Commissioner. Don't know whether there's anyone from Parks on the line that would be interested in responding. But we have no indication that there's been a change of policy with respect to the park and the entrance to the park. And at this point, we are at a point in design that it would be really questionably prudent for us to try to go back and redo that. Again, it would certainly be very costly. It would take an enormous amount of time. And we don't have, again, any indication that there is a change in any policy that would encourage or foster a different approach than the one that we've taken.
Okay. Oh, Mike Bradley.
Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, I just was thinking when for the response.
Yes, it's Mike Bradley from Parks Planning, and what Gwen said, yes. This project is approved by Parks and is at 100% and should move forward. We're pleased with its development and would like to see it implemented as quickly as possible.
On the flood wall and the battery, we wrote quite a long resolutions, I'm sure you're all aware, last May, and I'm just going through it, and so much of it did not get resolved, and at least according to what we had asked for. I'm just curious, one of the things that I know was discussed was that the wall surface itself would maybe be, you know, reconsidered in terms of a green wall, which of course certainly exists as a reality, and you know, like along, you know, Liberty Park. Is that something that was looked at and dismissed? And if so, why?
Rachel and Katie, can you?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take that. So yeah, this was something that was studied, and because of the fact that this wall is spanning over the tunnel, the infrastructure has to be so large, and by you know, adding a green wall to both sides of that, to a wall that's already 5 feet wide, you know, you're looking at quite a bit of extra width to that, as well as then issues that come up as far as making sure that that wall is sealed and protected against the actual vegetation on the wall itself. There are guidelines that need to be followed for the engineering of flood walls that are much different than a typical facade wall that you may be dealing with a building.
So
it was looked at.
Yes, it was looked at. We also looked at ways that we could add vegetation to the top of the wall that could possibly come down. And that again would then add height to the wall, which we all know is already, you know, fairly tall.
How much height would it add?
Most likely anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 feet.
So that's presumably what's being added to the pavilion where the green top is shown. That's 2 feet higher as a result of that decision to bring.
No, so that wall was able to stay in place because that had to do with the architecture below it. And because there was essentially room below it in how the, you know, waterproofing and insulation and things like that, there are ways to get that in, as well as the fact that that wall had variability in where it could move to. So we could push that point, as Pfeiffer's team presented last year on this, that point was able to be moved in order to kind of pull that away from the architecture a bit. And it can float over those doors.
Okay. I'm just going to, on behalf of the committee, just go through some of the points that we, you know, labored over just a few months ago, or actually almost a year ago. So also we asked for on the park building, is there a model of the building? I don't know if Mr. Pfeiffer's still on the phone, but is there a model of the building that's been made?
If he's not, there has been a model made of the building.
Is it possible that we could see that model? Is there somewhere that the community could see the model of the building as well as the model of the walls that you made and the columns? I saw pictures of that. It would be really helpful, I think, to begin to sort of see the 3 dimensions of this before it actually is 3-dimensional. Maybe that could be set up in some public place where, you know, folks could go see it and understand it. Is that possible, Gwen?
Absolutely. We've discussed where they could be made available. We can have them be available at AECOM's office. The getting them to Battery Park City Authority's office is a little bit cumbersome. So maybe Antoine or Rachel, maybe you could tell them where your office is and see if that's something that is doable for those who might want to go over and see it.
You could follow up all with just an email, and we'll circulate it around. But I think that would be really important. I think we have very little understanding of this building, which is, if you know, with all due respect, the elephant in the park. I mean, it's a huge piece of the park, and we really still don't have any real information that is quite, you know, detailed about it. I know we were promised sort of roof deck access and all, but we haven't really talked about that. I don't know if now's the time, but that is not part of, I guess, the BDC submission. But I have to agree with Laura Starr that certainly our concerns, I know you worked hard on them and we very much appreciate the work. It's a very difficult challenge, this building, I guess, in the way it's meeting the street, but you still have the very long tree esplanades that force people to come up a really long way up this alley and no access from the street. That didn't really get resolved. It seems to be exactly the same as what we saw before. And the color of the building changing, I'm not sure I really I understand the doors changing. I'm not understand why restaurant doors, which it looks like, I guess, could you confirm that you actually entered the restaurant from street level? Is that from the Battery Place? Is that
No.
correct?
No, that's
Oh,
the
so what
service.
is that set of doors for?
That's the, excuse me, that's the service access for the restaurant.
I see. So it's all service still. Okay.
Yeah, and the questions and the comments previously about access, public access, we have definitely reviewed, studied, analyzed. We have reported back on the results of that analysis and those studies. So it was not, those comments certainly were taken to heart and were used as a basis for evaluating what the options were. And the conclusion remained that a public access point from that street level in the middle was not workable. So as indicated previously, the access points on either end up the alley of trees meets all ADA universal accessibility standards. And I don't know, Tom, if you have anything more to add, but we certainly have spent a great deal of time looking at that.
I know you did, and we appreciate it. Where is the elevator when somebody, an elderly person, how did they get up into the site? Can you just show us where that is on the plan? I missed that. I know it was there before, I just didn't see it.
The access point for
somebody elderly who can't walk up, for example, that ramp, who needs an elevator, where do they go to get the elevator?
There is no access for the street level to an elevator. The access points for all universal accessibility, all ADA access is through the tree alleys.
So there is no elevator at all at ground level. There's no
publicly accessible elevator.
Okay.
No.
Wow. And are the ramps still approximately 150 feet long? Or I see something was shortened, but it looks like it's the same. Or were they shortened in some way?
Rachel, do you have that information, or Katie?
No, they have not been shortened since the last time we saw you. Yeah.
All right.
What's the length? Do we know?
I believe there's between 120 and 150.
Okay, so
Alice, it's Laura.
I
have to chime in on this. I mean, having spent now the last 2 months taking care of somebody recovering from surgery and using a walker and all of that, I think it's a travesty to not have a direct way to enter that building from the street. I think it's really unfair to elderly people and people with a lot of kids and people recovering from ski injuries and all sorts of things. I think it's not hospitable to make people walk on a windy site up almost 200 feet to get into a building, that is for events and things like that. I say this at every meeting. I'm done. That's it. I just had to say it one more time.
Well, does the architect, I mean, I don't know if Mr. Pfeiffer wants to speak to that. Or I don't know if he's still here, but it's a really important point. But,
well, no, I'm right here.
Oh, hello.
I think one of the most powerful moments was in one of the early community board meetings when we heard that everyone should use the same path. And that's where the journey of the LAs started. That you don't have stairs, you don't have other means that everyone can't take. And the idea that everyone walks up these LAs in exactly the same way, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they're walking, they all come through the LAs and into the building and into the park.
Well, I'm not sure I remember that meeting. I appreciate your point, but I will say that my own late father could have never, when he enjoyed so much coming here, could have never made it up that LA. But in any case, I think we've made that point. And then the last thing that was on our list, well, not the last, but one of many, was the Pier A columns. I'm not sure we actually, I guess the model that you have shows the columns, so we'll be able to see them, but we never really understood exactly what those look like. I see the one that you pointed out, but sort of the three lined up and then how that connects with the gates and the gates open and close. It would be helpful to see that just to have a better idea of the whole. Yeah.
We have another rendering. Do you have that in this deck someplace, or is that something that we can?
Yeah, we had asked for like scaled architectural drawings. We actually know the size of these things, but
Well,
just
yeah, I think the drawings didn't
Okay.
we present the drawings, but there's another rendering that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in this one, Gwen, but we
Yeah,
do
this
have
one
that
was-
shows all of them. Yeah.
Well, all right. I think what'll be great is when we get to see these models, and I guess maybe you can also, if we're going to AECOM or wherever we all get to go, you have the drawings in some format that's available for people to look at. Because I think people are beginning, particularly those who live in Battery Park City, as I'm sure you all know, are watching a lot more carefully all of this as it's imminent that the park will close and this building will come up, and they realize that and want to see as much as they can see and be prepared. So as much as you can give us, the community board, that we can disseminate on all of this would be great. And just so the follow-up will, we will write all this up, of course, to you, but specifically the tour coming up during the Earth Week, and the models and the drawings being available, and just letting us know where and when, and then we'll take it from there, I guess. Are there other folks that have comments? So I do see a few more hands up. It's getting on to 9:22. I'd love to close this out at 9:30. I'm sure we can do that. Rosa.
Thank you. I'll be really quick. Regarding these walls, these flood walls, I actually disagree 100% with Parks. I think that they should be climbable walls, because why go through all of this trouble for walls that are just walls? Why not have them be something that's interactive and fun and that people can climb on top of? And I think it would be a great joy to see children clambering up that wall and trying to figure stuff out in space and real life and not on their computers. So I hope that you will actually go back to the original design and actually have walls that welcome people and interactive experiences with people. That's it. Thank you.
To that point, Gwen, and all these points, are we to understand that the designs are 100% complete and that there really is no room for change at this point?
I think that, as we have indicated over the past several months, the opportunities for change are pretty much limited to the margins. Things that can be modified or tweaked without further approvals of other entities, or extensive changes to our design drawings. So yeah, it's pretty limited at this point in terms of opportunities for different design concepts, such as going back to the original wall concept, flood wall concept.
Okay, thanks. Laura, your hand is up. Are you back with another question or follow-up? Okay, Justine? Oh, okay, Justine? You have your hand up. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
that's,
do. Yeah, no, it's
okay.
not, it's new. So a couple of things, and I'll be fast too, because it's 5 minutes or less. So you just answered one question, Gwen. Folks, I'm responding out of people who are texting me, but folks were concerned and saying, what, in Teardrop Park, for example, the walls that are there are so, they're lovely. They blend in, they look so natural, and using something like that, is so much more attractive than what's being proposed here. But you say that that would be too much of a change. So that would not be possible to look at something like that. That's question one. So yes or no is fine. I'm just answering the first one.
Yeah, no, I mean, that comment has come up in the past.
Mhm.
And that comment has been, when earlier in the design development, the AECOM looked at a variety of different approaches, a variety of different designs and materiality. Worked very closely with Parks and with the Battery Conservancy and with PDC, and yeah, we don't have really the flexibility to go back and look at that again.
Change that now. And they were looked at and discarded for reasons that you don't have to explain right now, but they were looked at and discarded as not workable.
They were looked at, and I wouldn't use the word discarded. I would just use the term that, I would describe it. They were looked at, and through the evolution of the design process, that was not the direction.
Okay. All right. And then in terms of payment, I guess I'm not going to waste time here, but in our committee, let's talk about it. Who's paying for all this and how it's getting done and all that. We can talk about that at a different time. Maybe in the April meeting for Battery Park City Authority, Battery Park City Committee, sorry. Because
That
people are
sounds-
asking me questions about that.
It sounds like you did a great topic for that meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll keep you busy, I'm
Yes.
sure. Well, I see a few other changes. I just wanted to ask. So the change to the red concrete on the ground floor of the pavilion facing Battery Place, a red concrete versus real stone. That is also a fait accompli. That's a change that I think there was an attempt to try to warm up the surface, but this is now going to all be red concrete. Is that correct?
This was a change that was instituted in response to the community's comments from that we had a couple of meetings. We had one meeting that was devoted solely to this service entrance. And so this approach was presented last year. And that materiality and that coloring hasn't changed since then. Tom, would you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I remember the doors. I just didn't remember that the stone itself would change from the red concrete and then find itself into a natural stone as you go south towards the Battery. So just curious why that is.
Yeah, Tom, you want to? I don't know if he's still connected.
Yes. No, I'm right here. I think we wanted to try to take the warmth of this reddish concrete and bring that down to the street so that it would be one building, one project there. So it would have a kind of a unified front, and the vines are there and the planting is there on the berm. It creates, I think, a very kind of inviting, soft way to meet the city.
And how does it transition to the stone as you go towards the Battery? I guess that was what was unclear. Does it just end or curve?
Well, the stone is its seat height, I think.
Right. So
yeah, so it begins to rise up just slightly there, as you can see, towards the bench. And that is well in front of a very, very low part of the red wall behind the planting there.
So it's really the planting that makes a buffer. And then are those stainless steel guardrails? And I appreciate the work in changing those so that they are more elegant. And I wonder how, I assume you're going as wide as you can between the vertical posts. It seems like they were 2 5/16 inch I saw on some plan, but I was wondering why they could be wider apart. But
Yeah, well, they're the most they can be. They're 4 inches.
oh, they are
required
4
by
inches.
code.
Okay.
Yeah,
There
they're
was
4
some.
inches by code.
Oh, okay, I thought they were 3. Okay, great. And
Yes,
then
yes, yes.
are they consistent throughout? So that is what we will see throughout the entire park, because of course all of these ramps will require these I don't know if everyone realizes that, require these balustrades, right? Or guardrails. So will that be consistent throughout the whole park? And does that go up into the Battery, or is it just Battery Park City Authority? And then it sort of changes or something, like how does one, go south with these
Sure,
guardrails?
to answer
Do they
that.
change?
So within Wagner Park, the detailing of the handrail and guardrails will be the same. There's actually minimal guardrails within Wagner Park. And then the same details for the handrails are also seen in Pure Plaza. In the Battery, there aren't any rails needed for anything.
But the rails but between the water and the park, that's a complete.
Sea rails.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So in Wagner Park, the existing sea rails are staying as is, and then as it wraps around into Pure A, there's a design similar to this. It is kind of a picket design that essentially bridges the design between Battery Park City Sea Rail and then the existing Pure A Plaza Sea Rail.
Thanks very much. That was my series of questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? Great. Okay. Well, this was quite a long meeting. I want to thank everyone for their time and patience, and mostly to you all at the Battery Park City Authority for the sort of, indefatigable show upness and, allowance for many of our questions, continuous that they will be. And we look forward to, seeing what is to come of this, of course. And we want to just thank you for your time and all the hard work by all the team. It's a tremendous amount of work, and we recognize that. And we will follow up, as I said, with the things that we've asked for, and we look forward to being able to have more information and the tour and the models and all that wonderful stuff. So I don't think I have anything else to say except good night and thank you, everyone, very, very, very much. Really appreciate it.
Alice.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Committee members.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you.
Buddy.